FDA said it's coming out soon, and they're looking at how to apply the regulations, the law that was enacted in 2009 that applied to tobacco products, how they would apply it to e-cigarettes. Dare say, when that bill was written back in the late 90s and finally passed in 2009, not a single person that was looking at that bill ever considered e-cigarettes when that bill was drafted. So that is a challenge for FDA. It's a challenge for the new director, Zeller, who understands and wants to establish a comprehensive nicotine policy. There's a lot of pressure that says they should have already done it, but I think the FDA is taking a reasonable approach and trying to figure out how best to treat these products. One size does not fit all. Cigarettes are different than cigars, they're different than pipe tobacco, different than smokeless, and definitely different than e-cigarettes. So, as I mentioned, FDA has, what we understand is that it's at OMB. It's going to be coming out soon. Whatever that means, it's soon. I think it's going to be coming out soon. We look forward to working with the FDA to develop those reasonable regulations that understand and distinguish the difference in e-cigarettes and recognize the fantastic harm reduction possibilities that e-cigarette has. We can't treat e-cigarettes, we should not treat e-cigarettes like cigarettes. If we do, then we're giving no incentive for any cigarette smoker to ever try and switch away from cigarettes into e-cigarettes. And therefore, we never recognize that harm reduction possibility. We never take the smoker of a cigarette at the highest continuum of risk and move them down that ladder. So that's primarily what I wanted to talk about today. As you can see, it was heavy on harm reduction. I think it's an important element. I think it's an element that needs to be discussed. There's elements that some people agree on, some people don't. But I'm willing to be here and talk about that stuff. I can't be. If you have any questions along the way that you need to address, I'm always here. We have people here that can help respond to those questions. I appreciate your desire to understand and consider what policy is appropriate for e-cigarettes and how they're different. And if we can be any of assistance, Lord and Blue are always available. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. So, Chairman of the Public Health and the House, I recognize the House members before Chairman Crane gets up here and recognizes the Senate. So, first person to raise their hand, I'll take them. Representative Shelton, you're first up.
This stuff work over here? All right. Just had to make sure. First of all, I would be curious to know what your demographics of new users. You talked a lot about harm reduction. You talked about current cigarette users changing to the e-cigarette. I'm very curious on new users. Should I ask several questions at once, or should I? Will you give me the latitude? Since I'm sitting in the Senate chamber, you can't shut me down yet. All right, go ahead.
Well, that's what I was trying to say earlier when we talk about new users. I mean, this is those who are switching over. Our information shows that it's smokers. It's smokers who are using this product. If you look at information that's out there and the testimonials or other statements about those who are using e-cigarettes, it's users, it's smokers. We believe that the new trial users and users of e-cigarettes are smokers, and that is our target demographic when we market to them.
But you would agree that there are some new users of cigarettes that go directly to the e-cigarette, correct?
You mean not new users of cigarettes, you're saying that
new users of e-cigarettes, new users
may have never
of
smoked
tobacco
before.
Users are going straight to the e-cigarette.
There's always a likelihood that some may. However, would those users of e-cigarettes most likely have initiated with cigarettes instead if e-cigarettes weren't there?
If anybody else has a question.
There's just two. So no. That's all I got. Oh, I'm sorry. Eccles is here. Hey, I got Eccles. Holy smoke. I apologize. You guys got any questions?
I appreciate it. With incentivizing new users, incentivizing cigarette users to change over by not taxing e-cigarettes the same, would it also incentivize new tobacco users or people that have never used a tobacco product to try the e-cigarette?
I don't believe so. Again, for example, if I could find the disposable I showed is a $10 product. That is not insubstantial in its price. This the pack that I showed, the rechargeable, that's $30 or so. Cartridges, $15. That's a significant amount. You have sales tax on top of that at 8% or so. That's a significant amount. I'm sure. So let me find it. So this cartridge is, I think, about a pack, maybe a pack and a half of equivalent to a cigarette, to a cigarette pack, and then disposable is similar. So one cartridge or one disposable is roughly equal to, at least from our products, I can't speak for others, is roughly equivalent to a pack. Well, this cartridge is, you buy a pack of 5 for $15, ours. This product right here is $30, and it comes with a battery and a pack of 5 cartridges. And the disposable retails, I believe, for $9.99.
Any members of the Senate have any questions? Senator Sharp.
Thank you very much. I think this is an excellent idea for those individuals who are trying to wean themselves from cigarettes to have this opportunity to use an e-cigarette. But one of the concerns I have is in the private vape shops, the ingredients of which they're putting in here. What type of ingredients do you think that are harmful that we need to look at regulating at these private shops?
Well, I think that is an element. That's why we encourage FDA to make their determination soon. I think FDA is probably the appropriate agency to regulate that. So you know, cigarette manufacturers and smokeless manufacturers now have to report all their ingredients by product to FDA. They also have to report certain what they call harmful or potentially harmful constituents to FDA. FDA, I think that's one of the critical roles, and one of those sensible aspects of the regulation that FDA can administer. And I think that would be the most appropriate place for any regulation of products. And I think FDA is probably looking at that would be one of the first things that they did.
Thank you very much. What would you consider to be a reasonable tax for the state of Oklahoma to tax on e-cigarettes?
Well, you have to look at it in context of what taxes are out there. I mean, I believe the cigarette tax is just slightly over $1. The smokeless tax is less than that. If you're looking at the continuum of risk, if you're going to tax it at all, which of course I would advocate no tax, that's not a surprise. But if you're going to advocate a tax, it must be low. It must be lower so that you encourage that reflects that continuum of risk. Encourage anybody who's going to try or initiate with some type of tobacco product, they would initiate with a cigarette or a smokeless product, they would initiate with an e-cigarette or switch over from those products.
Mr. Shannon, thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate your words. Members, I'm now going to call on Dr. Joel Nitzkin for his presentation. Dr. Nitzkin is a senior fellow for tobacco policy with the R Street Institute. He is going to talk on the promise of e-cigarettes for tobacco harm reduction. Dr. Nitzkin.
Okay. Senator Crane, Representative Derby, thank you for the opportunity to present today. I have prepared for all the committee members, and hopefully you have them already. If not, they'll be available to you, a package containing 3 documents, one of which is the prepared remarks for my presentation here this morning. The second of which is an R Street policy paper, and the third one is a presentation that I gave to the same committee in October of 2012. This will be an update to that report. And what I will be doing here this morning is trying to basically paraphrase and move quickly through my prepared remarks to leave as much time as possible for questions and answers. You will note in my presentation that I have bibliographic references for basically every statement that I make, so you can check the sources. I also want you to be aware of the fact that on 2 occasions, the first after my 2012 presentation to this committee, the second one in the run-up to this, I have shared the R Street policy paper with representatives of the Oklahoma Department of Health and the Trust Fund, alerting them to the fact that I'll be here and speaking on this topic, encouraging them to review this data and respond in any way they could if they think that I'm misinterpreting data or they have bibliographic references that conflict with what I have to say. And I have received no response whatever from either the Health Department or the task force. What I will be doing this morning is briefly discussing the major science and policy issues in favor of both tobacco harm reduction and e-cigarettes as a harm reduction modality. Then I will focus on the thinking in our tobacco control program that has prevented us from moving ahead in this field. And finally, I'll make some suggestions in terms of what I think that you, as state legislators, ought to consider at this time as optimal tobacco control legislation for the state of Oklahoma. Now, what are the major science and policy issues in favor of both tobacco harm reduction and e-cigarettes? Well, it's quite simple. Nicotine addicts, but it is the toxic chemicals in cigarette smoke when inhaled deeply into the lung that kill people. Cigarettes have been so dominant as a cause of illness that all of the CDC statistics that you've heard, the 443,000 deaths a year due to cigarette smoking in the United States, which just last week were increased by the Surgeon General to an estimate of 480,000, that's all from one product, the cigarette, the combustible cigarette. Illness and death from other tobacco products are so low that CDC doesn't even bother tracking them. The next thing you ought to be aware of is, despite all of our vigorous tobacco control program and the promotion of these pharmaceutical products for smoking cessation, the numbers of cigarette smokers in the United States and the numbers of deaths attributable to cigarette smoking has been essentially stable for the past 10 years. It hasn't gone up, it hasn't gone down. So that suggests that cigarettes continue to remain a major cause of death in American society, and we've made progress since the 1960s, but we've hit a plateau. If we are going to do better in terms of reducing illness, death, and addiction from cigarettes and other nicotine products, we need a fundamentally new approach. Now, another factor that has to be considered is that there's a 15 to 20-year lag time between onset of smoking and onset of potentially fatal heart, lung, or cancer disease that's going to kill the smoker. The practical impact of that is that the vast majority of the 960,000 Americans projected to die from a cigarette-related illness over the next 20 years are currently adult smokers over 35 years of age. If we succeed in reducing youth intake or youth initiation of cigarettes at much lower levels, we will not see the impact of that change until about 20 years from now. So current policy, where all of the focus and all of the interest is on youth initiation of tobacco products, basically writes off the lives of the approximately 4 million current American adult smokers whose lives we could save just by letting them know they could reduce their risk by switching to a lower-risk smokeless product or to e-cigarettes. In addition to that, if we had a harm reduction component added to current tobacco control programming, which is what I am advocating for, and with what should be easy to accomplish switch rates, 20 years after initiation of that program, cigarette smoking and deaths attributable to cigarettes would be down to 80% less than what we have now. So that's a huge decrease. And I can think of no other feasible policy option that could give us a public health impact that substantial. In addition to that, another factor that has not been discussed, cigarettes to smokeless tobacco to a pure nicotine product. You are moving from the most highly addictive product to the least highly addictive product. Addiction to cigarette smoking has got 4 major elements to it. First is the nicotine. The second is other addictive chemicals in the cigarette smoke. The third is habituation to the cigarette handling ritual. And the fourth has to do with social and psychological factors, often mediated by marketing by the tobacco manufacturers and vendors. The cigarettes have all these characteristics. The smokeless tobacco products deliver much less in the way of toxic chemicals, and the science is quite incontrovertible. When you move from a cigarette to a smokeless product, be it snus, be it chewing tobacco, or other smokeless options, you are cutting the risk of a potentially fatal tobacco-attributable illness by 98% or more. In other words, you get 98% of the health benefit of quitting by switching. And when you go to an e-cigarette, which is a straight nicotine product, there's even less risk. Risk so low that it would be extremely hard to detect, even in the most detailed of our studies. Now, it is these potential public health benefits that have propelled me as a public health physician to devote my time and energy to try to advocate on behalf of tobacco harm reduction and e-cigarettes as a harm reduction modality. Now, the question arises, why the opposition from the tobacco control community to tobacco harm reduction in e-cigarettes? Well, there are 2 major reasons. Number one, the tobacco control movement, because of the dominance of cigarettes in the American market and because of the dominance of cigarettes as a cause of illness and death, have gotten into the habit decades ago of using the terms smoking and tobacco use as if they were synonymous. With that in mind, they have long ago set their goal as a tobacco-free society. That was set more than 30 years ago, and when it was set, the whole tobacco control movement was set on autopilot. And that has continued from that day to this. They've considered research that will make their programs consistent with that goal more effective, and they have simply ignored or dismissed research that suggests that maybe some tweaking of their strategy might enable them to become much more effective in preventing illness, death, and addiction. The information we have that shows the huge differences in risk between smokeless tobacco and cigarettes have come online in terms of definitive proof about a decade ago. And despite the availability of this information, the tobacco control movement, including the major federal agencies, have continued the mantra of a tobacco-free society and continued their opposition to all tobacco products. In their minds, they cannot conceive of the possibility that there might be a non-pharmaceutical tobacco product that could have favorable public health implications. They simply cannot come. Comprehend that possibility. There's another factor. They like to frame this debate in terms of the good public health people against the evil and avaricious, addict and kill people. It's not that simple. And the reason it's not that simple is that there is very substantial commercial bias relative to the tobacco control movement. Now, the people you see here in the field at the state level doing tobacco control work are the most well-intended, the most honest, the most hardworking and dedicated public servants you'd ever hope. But at the upper levels, when you take a look at the cancer, heart, and lung associations, tobacco-free kids, and even Centers for Disease Control in the NIH, and you take a look at the research community, they're literally saturated in pharmaceutical industry funds. These organizations depend on pharmaceutical funding to run most of the national meetings. They're generously supported by the pharmaceuticals, and I think they're very much aware that if they adopt policies that would be damaging to their pharmaceutical sponsors, that funding may be cut back or may be eliminated. When you take a look at the potential impact of e-cigarettes on pharmaceutical products like the patches and gum and so on, I think you can understand how, if people understand that they could get 98% or more of the benefit of quitting by switching to e-cigarettes, and in doing so get a product that truly satisfies their urge to smoke, why would they bother with these other cigarettes? I'm sorry, these pharmaceutical products. Data available from Great Britain shows almost a one-to-one inverse relationship. As sales of e-cigarettes have increased, revenues from the patches in gum and pharmaceutical inhalers has gone down. By one estimate, and I don't know how well this is founded, there's one estimator that claims that at this point in Great Britain, revenues for e-cigarettes exceeds the revenues for these pharmaceutical products. Such data are not available in the United States since there is no public source of data by which we can separate the pharmaceutical smoking cessation products from others. The next issue has to do with teen recruitment. And let me just hit 2 points. Number one, the data available from the recent CDC survey supports the notion that teens who are not already smokers simply don't like e-cigarettes. The CDC data are based on, have you ever tried it? Lots of teens have tried it, very few have continued. There are 2 recently published studies, one in the USA and one in Great Britain. The American study, adults only, could only find 6 of 1,800 non-smokers who ever used an e-cigarette. The British study, including 12,000 adults and 2,000 teens, could not find a single non-smoker who regularly uses e-cigarettes. So the e-cigarettes are skyrocketing, it's people using them to wean themselves off smoking. Let me just conclude by saying, giving some recommendations. Number one, what should a state legislature do? The first thing you should do is impose the same age restrictions on sale of e-cigarettes and all other tobacco products. And this is for 2 reasons. Number one, nicotine is toxic to the adolescent brain, and there is evidence of brain change and brain damage to adolescents. And number two, if someone starts smoking as an adolescent, they're much more likely to become a long-term smoker than if they delay initiation till after that. In fact, I would even encourage the state of Oklahoma to up the age cutoff from 18 to 21. The second thing that you should do is take a look.
Guys, I'm trying. Their feed sucks.
At your tax policy and arrange the tax policy so that there is a substantial gap in cost, where cigarettes cost more and the smokeless products, e-cigarettes, cost less. So there's a financial incentives for smokers to at least try these alternatives to see if they work. The next item, never mentioned by the tobacco control community, is that if you do these tax changes, heavily taxed cigarettes, you're likely to see an influx of contraband. In a study recently done in high-tax jurisdictions on the eastern seaboard of the United States, they found 58% of the cigarette packs discarded in these areas that they looked at did not have correct local tax stamp. They figured at least 30 or 40% of the cigarettes were just outright contraband. And finally, I would urge you to talk to the public health community to open their minds and hearts to the possibility of adding a tobacco harm reduction component the current public health.
Guys, I'll be back in just a second. I'm going to try to switch to a different internet connection. Peace, it's
Thank you.
mine.
I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Sorry.
Thank you, Doctor. Are there any questions from House members? Representative Hilton.
To help us do a better job of reducing illness, injury, and addiction from tobacco products. It was that research that led us, that opened our eyes to the promise of tobacco harm reduction and then again e-cigarettes. Given the expense of trying to track what's going on where and the expense of traveling, the American Association of Public Health Physicians simply did not have the financial resources to support that kind of activity. None of it was going to be available from the tobacco control community, which is very well funded, but totally against any consideration of these issues. I knew if I connected with the tobacco company that would destroy my credibility right away, so I was looking for a neutral third party, and our street came to my attention. This is they describe themselves as a right-of-center libertarian think tank based in Washington, D.C., who recognizes the right of government to regulate consumer products to protect health and to protect the environment, but is very strongly against any overstepping by the government into levels of regulation not justified to protect the health of the public. So, with that in mind, I have accepted their funding, and they are making it possible for me to make these presentations. And no, I'm not licensed in the state of Oklahoma. I've had no communication with the medical society.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a quick question, and you caught my attention there at the end about overstepping of government to regulate. And in our state, we have a methamphetamine problem. People in our state tend to ingest things that aren't good for them in huge quantities. And so with that in mind, we have decided not to regulate pseudoephedrine as strictly as some people would wish, because many believe that's government overstepping their responsibility to save people from themselves, if you will. That being said, though, I'm worried about this propylene glycol. And I wonder, have there been longitudinal studies on that? I mean, I know that it's approved apparently by the FDA, but what about when it's heated and then inhaled? Do we have 20-year studies or anything like that that would tell us what this does over long term?
Well, propylene glycol is heated to a slight extent and used for theatrical fog. It is well recognized by FDA, has been recognized for decades as essentially safe. It has been used as a propellant in some asthma inhalers. The heating that's done in the e-cigarette does not degrade it to any significant degree. So as far as we can tell, it appears to be as completely safe as any such product could be. We're not concerned about the health effects. And not only that, propylene glycol is also present in cigarettes.
Follow up. I just wondered if there had been longitudinal studies on when it's inhaled in the lungs. Have there been any studies on it? 'Cause the e-cigarettes are fairly
Not
new.
directly to my knowledge,
Thank
no.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm disappointed you're not licensed here. I kind of want to look at my back when I'm here, but I've got 3 questions if I can go through those. You mentioned damaging to adolescent brain cells.
Yes.
So once you're past adolescence, we don't have that issue? If you could clarify some of that.
That's correct. That is not an adult issue. That's only an issue basically for children and adolescents use, ingest, or inhale nicotine in any form.
Okay. And then you talked about bumping up that age restriction,
Yes.
19 to 21. I just hadn't heard that from anyone before. And so I wonder how familiar you are with our tribal issues and if you've looked at that at all, what that might do with other states or anything at all.
No, to be honest, I'm not familiar with the tribal issues. The question of upping the age has to do with the fact that tobacco control community has tried to make the case that if somebody doesn't start smoking as a child or adolescent, they'll never become addicted. Well, that's not true. It hasn't been true. But the risk of becoming addicted is much stronger if you're under the age of 18. Now, there are data, and they're presented in the papers that you have in the handout material, shows in 2002 about half of current adult smokers started smoking when they were below 18 years of age. But when you take a look at the most recent 2012 data, that percentage is way down, and about half of the current adult smokers started smoking after 18 years of age. So the idea of upping the age cutoff to catch some more of those is a worthwhile thing to do. And again, the age cutoff, whatever it is, should be imposed across all tobacco and nicotine products.
Okay. And final question, given your comments today, I wonder, is there any case or any situation where you would recommend the banning of any products or additional measures on the issue of secondhand smoke?
On the issue of secondhand smoke, one of the things in my prepared presentation I didn't have a chance to get to was the studies that show that the amount of other toxic chemicals that is exhaled by the vapor are so low that they are not detectable above background levels. So there is no health reason to ban e-cigarettes in non-smoking areas. The other reason to consider banning e-cigarettes is that if a smoker sees somebody using an e-cigarette in a non-smoking area, would that encourage the smoker to light up? That seems unlikely to us. There's some who say, well, a bystander could not tell the difference between an e-cigarette and a regular cigarette. Even in the e-cigarettes that are made to look exactly like a cigarette, if you've seen them, they're very easy for a bystander to tell which product they're dealing with. So we don't think that argument holds water either. So my report specifically recommends that you do not ban use of e-cigarettes in non-smoking areas. There's no reason to impose that restriction.
Any more questions for House members?
Senator Standridge, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are you familiar with a few years ago nicotine lollipops that you?
Yes.
My experience I've been in pharmacy for many years, and I was very disturbed with that. It seems very similar in that nicotine lollipops were taken away after I saw them help lots of people quit smoking. Do you feel like this is a similar type of effort by vested parties to try to slow down this growth of this product? And we may look back and say, how many people could we have got off of smoking if we had let it go forward?
Well, as far as I could tell, I've never seen any information that indicated that the nicotine lollipops were satisfactory enough to smokers to enable them to quit smoking. And at the same time, I haven't seen data that showed that they attracted lots of kids. Now, kids may have tried them once, but I don't think they continued their use. The unique element with e-cigarettes is their ability to satisfy the urge to smoke in about half of the smokers who try them, and that's with the products available today, with reason to believe that with the technical advances, with the electronic nicotine delivery systems, so that they could probably, satisfy the urge to smoke in an even higher percent of smokers. So that's what makes e-cigarettes so unique, why they've caught on, their ability to satisfy the urge to smoke.
Senator Sharp, you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you coming to Oklahoma. I'm very impressed with the knowledge of this subject. Is there any indication that secondhand vapor is harmful? Is there any indication that you've been able to research in that area?
Again, there's quite a bit of data in this, and the research is referenced in the documents I put out, but the fact that the quantities of toxic chemicals put out by the cigarettes, now there is measurable nicotine in the air, which is tiny and which is not toxic in and of itself. The other chemical substances and even the particulate matter are so low that they are not measurable above background levels. So that indicates to us that there's just no hazard. Now, most people don't know the fact that ordinary people who don't smoke, who don't use e-cigarettes, do exhale tiny amounts of formaldehyde, acetone, acetaldehyde, a whole long list of other chemical substances. And e-cigarettes don't add measurably to that.
Follow up, Mr. Between pharmaceutical pushed patches and pills and the e-cigarettes, is there any research as to which is most effective in helping someone stop smoking?
The pharmaceutical products that are the center of the official tobacco control program fail more than 90% of the people who use them as directed, even under the best study conditions. And this isn't due to other experience. This is actually from research that the FDA used to approve them. When results are measured 6 to 12 months after you have in the people who use the pharmaceutical product, depending on the product, either a 6 to 9% quit rate as opposed to a baseline quit rate of 3%. So it doubles or triples the quit rate, but still fails more than 90%. Now, while they're using the product, about 40% of people stay off the cigarettes. There are two problems that plague all of these pharmaceutical nicotine delivery products. Number one, they're underdosed to satisfy the needs of large numbers of smokers, and the nicotine comes on fairly slowly. And number two, the concept. You can give it to them for 12 weeks and then expect them to be forever abstinent from nicotine is simply unreasonable. That we don't know that to occur with any addictive substance. So the e-cigarettes provide basically the same nicotine that should be as safe as these pharmaceutical products for as long as the vapor feels the need for it. And not only that, being free of the other chemical substances, it's a product that's easier to quit. It is the only product that we know of that we can offer someone who is unable or unwilling to quit that will enable them to reduce their risk of these potentially fatal illnesses.
Thank you so much. Would it be responsible for a state to encourage the e-cigarette usage as well as ensure that insurance companies provide cessation options to people that lived here? Is it a trifecta of options? Should people have a trifecta of options, or is today just about the e-cigarette?
No, I can deal with that topic. Quite frankly, the information available is that the insurance coverage of the products is largely a waste of money because the products are so ineffective, that the effect is so short. But according to the official tobacco control policy, it's the only thing they have to offer these smokers. And again, the references to the ineffectiveness and literally the zero effectiveness of just giving people premeditation without the education counseling is really impressive. Insurance companies pick up the cost of e-cigarettes. And the tobacco harm reduction program is one that will cost the state or Fed a penny. It is simply a matter of informing smokers, the general public, of the difference in risk. And once the fact that they have a problem, they can reduce their risk and move to an easy product by themselves. This is what all the e-cigarette. It hasn't been the advertising; it's been this effectiveness and this attractiveness.
Thank you, sir. I'm giving the analogy of beer again. In stores in the state of Oklahoma, convenience stores and grocery stores, you can buy 3.2 beer. My question is, for those people addicted to cigarettes that need a higher nicotine rate, should those people be forced to go use perhaps a pharmacist or a great pharmacist such as this one to get a higher one to truly work on the reduction that they're working with a doctor, and the vape shops that have popped all over the state of Oklahoma be limited to the amount of nicotine they can sell?
Well, I think there's a public health justification for imposing that kind of limitation on the nicotine in e-cigarettes. You want to give a smoker enough to satisfy their urge, and you will hear from a subsequent speaker today about the vape shops, and that's precisely the role that vape shops do. They try to help match the right product to the smoker so they'll get the benefit, and even help walk them through the process by which they can eventually get off nicotine entirely.
Seeing no further questions, Doctor, thank you very much for your presentation. I would now like to call Mr. Sean Gore, who is chairman of the Oklahoma Vapor Advocacy League, to come make his presentation entitled E-Cigarettes Equals Quitting Tobacco. Mr. Gore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Chairman Crane, Chairman Derby for holding this hearing. I would also like to thank Senator Johnson, Senator Brinkley, and Representative Derby for requesting the interim study. My name is Sean Gore. I'm the chairman of OVL, the Oklahoma Vapors Advocacy League. I'm also a certified environmental professional, the CEO of Gore Petroleum Land and Environmental Company. We specialize in numerous regulatory and environmental consulting issues in the oil and gas industry there. Basically, I'm here speaking to you today on behalf of all these people up here, vape shops, consumers in the state of Oklahoma. I think you can see there's quite a support. We've tried for years to get away from tobacco products and its harmful effects, yet we find something that works. Someone or some organization wants to penalize or ostracize us for taking the step that should all rights be commended. Get down to the truth. Why? And the answer is money. Bottom line is money. If these organizations and entities were really concerned about clean air and our health on state properties, then why are we not addressing such topics as chemicals emitted by fragrance consumer products like air fresheners in this very building today? Did you know that the very fragrance products used every day were tested and shown to have emitted more than 17 VOCs or volatile organic compounds? Of these, 1 to 8 were toxic or hazardous. Why aren't we concerned about this issue? Again, money. Health organizations as well as the state do not profit from the sale of these products, so it's not much of a concern. When is good news bad news? When people stop engaging in unhealthy behaviors that state government relies on for funding. Oklahoma now ranks 39th nationally for its rate of adult smoking, down from 7th just last year. There were 14 million fewer tax stamps sold last year. That's a 5.2% drop. Ask yourself this. Where do the state health organizations get a lot of their funding? The answer is the tax stamps on the bottom of each pack of cigarettes, which the first 23 cents of each pack of cigarette goes to the state fund to repay bonds. The revenue generated by 80-cent increase supports multiple health uses, general government expenditures, and local governments. 17% of the 80-cent tobacco tax goes to the state's general revenue fund. In the case of E-Cig and special interest groups such as lung, heart, and cancer, this means money collected from payments generated under the 1998 Tobacco Master Settlement Agreement between the state and federal excise tax on cigarettes, and also the tobacco settlement payments, which are over half of the price of pack cigarettes. So if the majority of all tobacco smokers are switching to the much safer style of nicotine replacements such as e-cigarettes or personal vaporizers, which are not sin taxed, then what happens to these organizations' funding? They cease to exist. Big Pharma is also at risk. They have created and marketed while spending millions to get their so-called nicotine replacement and cessation products to the public. If the majority of today's smokers are switching to the e-cigarettes or personal vaporizers instead of their products, which are proving to be less effective, and to lose billions in revenue. Let's take Chantix, for example. They spend millions in marketing research, and it's even FDA approved and has been linked to over 500 suicides. I don't know of one e-cigarette or personal vaporizer that's been linked in any such case. The e-cigarette market is projected to overtake the tobacco industry within this decade. Truth be told, they need people to buy tobacco for their own survival. What is happening through TSET and Governor Fowler's executive order is basic indoctrination. If the health organizations, special interest groups, and Big Pharma can demonize e-cigarettes through bribes using taxpayer dollars, framing health issues, then they can make it easier to personal vaporizers and e-cigarettes taxed, thus saving jobs and accomplishing self-preservation. Let's take, for example, a health advisory, and I want to pick on Dr. Klein here for a minute. A health advisory issued by Dr. Klein in the Oklahoma Department of Health shortly before Governor Fowler's executive order was announced. The Oklahoma Department of Health asserts that e-cigarette vapors contain a variety of toxic substances, such as formaldehyde, that can harm the health of bystanders. For upon review, the citations used by the Department of Health to back up their claims appear to be misrepresented. One study cited by the Department of Health says the formaldehyde that was detected in the test chamber at a minute level could have been from the test subject's exhaled breath. Since it was detected before the subject actually used the electronic cigarette, the other study states that contaminants that were detected in trace amounts in e-cigarettes were comparable to the reference product. Now, the reference product used in this study happens to be the very same pharmaceutical nicotine inhaler product that is both promoted and provided by the Oklahoma Department of Health to Oklahomans attempting to quit smoking. Why would the Department of Health view e-cigarettes as a public hazard while at the same time promoting a profitable pharmaceutical product that shares a comparable toxicology profile? Something doesn't add up. The governor's abuse of power sidestepped the legislative process while stepping on legislators' toes when she signed the executive order banning the use of electronic cigarettes or personal vaporizers on state properties. There was no imminent risk to human health to constitute such an order. The legislators of this great state have been working very diligently with OPAL to find acceptable and reasonable regulations for the e-cigarette and vaping industry. In doing so, they showed her willingness to put her own agendas ahead of those people. She based her decision on misinformation and scare tactics provided by Dr. Klein in the Oklahoma Health Department. As Commissioner of Health, it is Klein's duty to supply the governor with all facts, not cherry-picked, outdated inconsistencies. If the health organizations were truly concerned about taking and promoting long-lasting solutions for health, such as self-preservation, we would stand with other groups such as ours to help adults away from tobacco products, while implementing reasonable regulations preventing our youth from accessing these products. This should be the first step, but it relies on information and bribes that the organizations are trying to influence the state and local communities and individual civil liberties.
Your topic is e-cigarettes equals quitting tobacco. You want to take this opportunity to submit a comment regarding the commissioner. I would ask that you do that at some later time. So if you can go forward, I'm talking about.
They didn't like that, did they? Ah!
Whatever you choose to do.
Basically what we have is nicotine. It's toxic and it affects the nervous system and heart. While putting any form of substance into the body should be discouraged, it cannot, however, be totally avoided. Nicotine is a stimulant similar to caffeine and poses no more of a health risk to the user when the e-cigarettes or personal vaporizers are any more than caffeine would when drinking a cup of coffee. It is the other carcinogens in cigarette smoke that pose major health risk. Although while nicotine is addictive and at toxic high levels and should be at high levels and should at all times be kept away from children and pets, the dose makes the poison. That's the basic principle of toxicology. Even current FDA-approved nicotine replacement products on the market today have a history of sickening children. Studies indicate that oral ingestion of nicotine below 50 milligrams to 60 milligrams per unit volume weight is not harmful to adults. Nicotine in the e-liquids sold to the consumer do not contain more than 36 milligrams and is not orally consumed but inhaled. In fact, over the past decade, new research has taught us more about how nicotine affects the brain and body. For example, a lower incident of Alzheimer's disease in smokers. This transformation with nicotine happened when the nicotine patch was introduced. In 2000, a study performed at Stanford revealed surprising results about nicotine effects on blood vessels. Contrary to popular opinion, the study showed that nicotine actually boosts the growth of new blood vessels. The discovery may lead to new treatments of diabetes. Also, in 2006, scientists found that people with depression who were treated with nicotine patches report a decrease in their depressive feelings. We don't know what's in there. Yes, we do. Propylene glycol. Propylene glycol is a preservative that has been around since the 1950s and is used in almost everything we eat and come in contact with on a daily basis. Makeup, food preservatives, etc. It is even used in hospitals or breathing treatments with albuterol. It is distributed, where albuterol is distributed to the lungs. The PG is a binding agent and is used as a delivery vehicle to carry the steroid. Vegetable glycerin is of a sweet nature and low toxicity. It is a simple polyol compound that is widely used in pharmaceutical formulations. U.S. food grade flavoring, I don't think it's pretty much self-explanatory. Distilled water, the same. Nicotine, we just went over that. These 5 ingredients are what primarily make up the liquids, and they should be the only ingredients allowed to make e-liquids. All of these ingredients are approved by the FDA for human consumption. Clean air, we've been having a lot of issues with their secondhand vapor. There's 3 studies that I would like to reference. 2 of them are conducted here in the United States. The first study, called Peering Through the Mist, conducted by Dr. Igor Burston with the Department of Environmental and Occupational Health at Drexel University in 2013, confirmed that chemicals in electronic cigarettes pose a minimal health risk. The study, which has been peer-reviewed and published in the BMC Public Health Journal, reviewed over 9,000 observations about the chemistry of the vapor and the liquid in e-cigarettes. Dr. Burston was able to determine that the levels of contaminants e-cigarette users are exposed to are insignificant, far below levels that would pose any health risk. Additionally, there are no health risks to bystanders, further stating that there is no serious concern about the contaminants such as volatile organic compounds like formaldehyde, acrolein, etc., in the liquid or produced by heating. While these contaminants are present, they have been detected at problematic levels only in a few studies that apparently were based on unrealistic levels of heating. Frequently, concern about contamination of the liquid by non-trivial quantity of ethylene glycol or diethylene glycol remains based on a single sample of an early technology, and even this did not rise to the level of health concern and has not been replicated since. The biological and chemical toxicology research lab smoking in Verona, Italy, have been based on concerns that there is in Athens, Greece, presented an abstract in 2012 for the Clearstream Air Project. The conclusions of the study follow as such. The above experiment within the limits of the observed parameters has underlined that e-smoking does not produce detectable amounts of toxic and carcinogenic substances in the air of an enclosed space. Further studies are needed to better understand a potential risk to bystanders, but the studies show there is no concern. The second study was done by Informa Healthcare. They did an inhalation toxicology study in 2012, and the conclusion of that study said, and I quote, "The current study indicates that there are very low indoor air quality impacts from the use of an electronic cigarette based on the risking of measured emissions. It also indicates no apparent risk to human health from cigarette emissions based on the compounds analyzed." A European study on the Biological and Chemical Toxicology Research Laboratory in Verona, Italy, with the Onassis Cardiac Center in Athens, Greece, presented an abstract in 2012 for the Clearstream Air Project. The conclusions of the study follow as such. The above experiment within the limits of the observed parameters has underlined that e-smoking does not produce detectable amounts of toxic and carcinogenic substances in the air of an enclosed space. Further studies are needed to better understand all the involved aspects. However, this preliminary assessment indicates that passive vaping impact when compared to traditional cigarette smoking is so low that it is just detectable and does not have a toxic and carcinogenic characteristics of cigarette smoking. The absence of combustion and the lack of sidestream smoking with its known toxic effects are probably the main reasons for the differences observed in air pollution characteristics between e-cigarettes and tobacco smoking. It goes further to say, on the basis of the obtained results, the ARPA data about urban pollution, we can conclude by saying it could be more unhealthy to breathe air in big cities compared to staying in the same room with someone who is vaping. This next one is a mouthful. Dr. Konstantinos Farsalinos was one of the doctors involved with this study. He also conducted studies on stiffening of the arteries, cardiovascular, cardiac cells, and cardio O2 supply to the heart. All the conclusions study showed no apparent change after using e-cigarettes, however, did show considerable negative change in all areas after smoking a traditional tobacco cigarette. I want to note that Dr. Wagner with the study last year on the pulmonary lung function change as well, and there showed to be no change on lung function in that, Dr. Wagner. We've heard a lot about targeting minors with flavors. That's simply not true. In the past year, the lobbying arms and groups, the American Cancer, Heart, and Lung, have become staunchly against cigarettes, and they have even begun opposing simple bills to ban sales to minors because they aren't defining e-cigarettes in proposed laws as tobacco products and subjecting them to the same taxation as products like cigars. Yet these organizations are at the very heart of the ones that are opposing our small youth prevention bills. You know, why? Just because something isn't defined as tobacco or this or that, we need to protect our youth. So I think the one thing that we can't agree with is we need to protect our youth. We need these youth prevention laws in place. The real reason for all the flavors is because when a person gives up tobacco,
with us. This is terrible. And
their sense of taste and smell come back and not desire the taste of tobacco.
I'm going to be dropping one of the cast and letting somebody else take it over, so hopefully to lessen my feed too. So bear with us for a little bit.
In which they, I quote, the results of this survey indicate that electronic cigarette liquid flavorings play a major role in the overall experience of dedicated users and support the hypothesis that they are important contributors in reducing or eliminating smoking consumption. This should be considered by health authorities based on the current minimal adoption of electronic cigarettes by youngsters. It is reasonable to support that any proposed regulation should ensure that flavorings are available to electronic cigarette consumers, while at the same time restrictions to the use by youngsters, especially non-smokers, should be imposed in order to avoid future penetration of electronic cigarette use to this population. E-cigarettes are a precursor. E-cigarettes are not a precursor to smoking, and there are studies coming out continuously stating as such. A study that came out in Forbes magazine on October 31st, 2013, titled "Study Suggests E-Cigarettes Are Not a Gateway to the Conventional Kind," and was conducted by Theodore Wagner, an assistant professor of general and community pediatrics at the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center. Professor Wagner conducted a survey of 1,300 college students and found that only 43, that's 3.3%, said that e-cigarettes were the first form of nicotine they'd tried. Of those, only 2.3%, later started smoking conventional cigarettes. It didn't seem as though it really proved to be a gateway to anything, said Wagner. Wagner further went on to say in Health Day that most teens and adults who use e-cigarettes seem to be using them to stop smoking or at least to reduce the harm of smoking tobacco. Another study found, and I quote, most adolescents
Again, sorry guys. It's buffering. I can't do a thing about it.
males were aware of e-cigarettes, and a substantial minority were willing to try them. Action on smoking and health.
Mr. Chairman. Sean, I really appreciate you being here today, and I appreciate you living in the best Senate district in the state of Oklahoma. But I did have a couple of questions. I appreciate all the work you've done working with me over the last couple of years as we've been trying to work on this topic. And I wanted to, I know the answer to some of these questions, but I wanted to ask you so you could explain, you know, as far as the president of OVAL, you also are a vapor store owner. Is that your primary business? Is that what you desire to do in life, is own a vapor shop, or do you have another career?
No, actually, Gore Petroleum Land Environmental is my main career. That's what pays the bill. Most of the money that is made through our stores, get vapes, like I say, it's not the majority. They're put back into the store. to either open new stores, increase inventory. That's how we got into this business. You know, I rode bulls for 19 years. Oil and gas, tobacco is a pretty prevalent thing. I've been dipping since I was 5 years old. When you grow up on a ranch in northwest Oklahoma, every kid grew up carrying a snuff can in his back pocket. Started smoking when I was 20. I remember one time I was judging a bull ride, and I had a patch on my back, a chew in my cheek, a dip in my lip, chewing on the Nicorette gum, puffing on the Nicotrol inhaler, smoking a cigarette. Something's not working. I've tried the Chantix, I've tried everything, and pretty much gave up. Even tried the Blues by Laura Lard, where they did give you the nicotine. Smoking is it's not only addictive, it's psychological and physical. So, you know, at the vape shops, like you know, Dr. Niskin was talking, one of the first things we want to do is find out how much you smoke. What do you smoke? That helps us determine what kind of kit to put you in that can give you the greatest success. But this is the only thing that's worked for me. I had a half a pack of cigarettes left. That usually took me less than a half a day to smoke. It took me 2.5 days. It's been over 1.5 years, and I've not touched a tobacco cigarette since, or a tobacco product since.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And which leads to my next question, Sean. You know, we can read all the statistics we want, we can read all the studies we want, but you as a store owner and on behalf of your members, how many of them have you talked to or seen that have tried all the other products, tried to quit and been unsuccessful, but now have been able to be successful by switching to an electronic nicotine device?
What we're starting to see now is individuals bypassing the other avenues. As the cigarette industry is becoming more popular, people are wanting to save money, and it is a good way to save money. I mean, my wife and I went from a $400 a month habit to $30 a month after we got our hardware. So, you know, if you take into consideration that you're buying the pharmaceutical products that are shown to be less effective, they can actually save money by bypassing that area. So at first, a lot of them. Now we're just starting to see more and more people just come straight to the e-cigarette.
Follow up? Please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, which leads to my next question. You know, the statistics show everything I've read, and you cited one of them, that this is not a gateway product. This does not lead typically to people taking up other forms of tobacco. But I wanted to know from a personal experience or on behalf of the other shop owners, how often is it that somebody walks into your store and says, I've never had a form of nicotine in my life, but I want to try one of these?
Not very often. I can think of maybe one instance since we've been open since February of last year, our first store, just off the top of my head, but it's very rare, and what we actually do is, you know, we'll try to dissuade them from it. I mean, you know, if you haven't ever tried nicotine, even as a 30, 40-year-old adult, don't.
One more two-part follow-up, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for the leeway. But my first part of my last question is, as a store owner or on behalf of other store owners, is it common, or have you had people that have come in to pursue these products because, well, I mean, I hope there's a lot that are coming in because they would like to quit smoking. But have you had very many that have come in and said, you know, they want to take it up because there are places they can't smoke, and they would like to see if this is something they would like to pursue because they can do it in places where you're not allowed to smoke?
Are you talking about somebody who had already smoked?
A smoker, a current smoker coming in and possibly wanting to switch because either it's freezing outside in the state of Oklahoma, or where they work or where not, they cannot smoke a traditional cigarette, so they want to look into the possibility of e-cigarettes.
Yeah, I mean, you have a few, but like I say, it's not the majority. Most of the people coming in really want to move away from the tobacco cigarette and give it up altogether. But some do. What we've found out is some people trying to use that example have ended up moving away from the tobacco cigarette altogether. You know, they took up the e-cigarette to smoke outside because it was cold. 2-3 weeks later, they realized, hey, I've never touched a tobacco cigarette since.
And the last part of that question is, in your opinion, from your perspective, as a state, as the policymakers, if we treat these electronic devices exactly like we do cigarettes, and we say they're all bad, we're going to ban all of them, we're going to tax them the same, we're going to treat them the same, are you going to have as many people incentivized to actually switch from traditional cigarettes, except for the people that just really, really want to quit? Are you going to have as many people wanting to switch to something that is less harmful if, as a state, we educate people that they're all the same and that they're all equally as bad?
No, I mean, if you're going to get sinned, what's the point of switching this? I mean, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it. I think they should only be subjected to sales tax. I think if somebody's making a move in the right direction, in a positive direction, to try to improve their health and the lives of those around them, why should they be punished for that with any type of excise taxation? Because that's simply what it is. I think these should be subjected to sales tax only, and the funds go to the municipalities. I mean, it can venture up from there.
Representative Daniel, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gore, you're a lot more angry than when I first met you 2 years ago, and I
want the truth.
Well, you're getting, I guess we're getting it, because I thought at one time we had the same goals as TSET, to get people to quit smoking tobacco products, and today I hear a different tone in your voice, so help me out. I've never been to one of the vape shops. Are the vape shops run by the tobacco industry, as the e-cigarettes are? Can you explain the difference, and do you see big tobacco ending up taking over your industry?
No, ma'am. These are individually owned shops, small mom and pop shops that have popped up. It's run primarily from people that have a passion and want to help get the word out that there is a safer product, while at the same time creating additional employment. As far as big tobacco goes, they are getting into the industry. As far as we're concerned, it's our industry. If they want to play in it, play by our rules. We don't have a problem with that. We're all for capitalism and free enterprise.
Follow up. Thank you. Could you explain to me, because I've never smoked either of these products or inhaled them, but I got surprised.
Vape the product.
But it sounds like there is tobacco in the e-cigarette, and the industry is very much into it, and they're using that product for whatever reason, to get people to use that product versus a cigarette or a smoking cessation, whatever. But the vapor product, it seems, is different. Is that correct?
As what now?
The e-cigarette versus the vape shops.
Yes. Let me go right here real quick.
Well, I know what they look like. I do know what they look like.
What you have with Blues or Enjoy and the Views, there's a place in the market for those. A lot of times, like I say, smoking is so addictive, and you have to have that security blanket of your pack of cigarettes, but yet you have something that you can start and go to. Basically, what we're seeing is people will go to the Blues, the Enjoys, the Views, then they'll come into the vapor shops and they'll move up to a battery that lasts longer. They'll be able to control the nicotine, so they don't have to use cigarettes and vape like Senator Johnson referring to, going outside, this and that. It provides you more freedom to dial in your levels and what you need to accomplish moving away from tobacco.
Would you agree your goal would be to put yourself out of business? Because you say here on page 5, nicotine, toxic, and its effects on the nervous system and heart, while putting any form of foreign substance into the body should be discouraged. So ultimately your goal should be to put you and e-cigarettes out of business. Would that be right? So people wouldn't have to put a foreign substance into their body.
Well, let's look at it this way. If everybody moved away from, the harmful effects of tobacco through e-cigarettes and eventually moved off, it'll be a different avenue of income, but at least you can play a part in saying, you know what, I helped the world become a safer place. If everybody quit and successfully, and there was no need for the e-cigarette, then I'd say that's pretty dang successful.
Thank you. Mr. Gore, let me first just say that every time me and you have met, you have been on the up and up with me, and I appreciate the way that you've handled yourself, not only in front of this committee, but in these halls over the last year. And so I just want to thank you for your willingness to be here once again and
Thank you, sir.
work the legislature. So that's a compliment.
Thank you.
All right. My question is what I have heard about vape shops is that go to one vape shop, get one formula. Go to another vape shop, potentially get another formula of what the formula, I don't know.
The e-liquids?
The liquids. Because there's no regulation on those liquids, they can build that compound all by themselves. Would that be a true statement?
Technically, yes, since there's no regulations in place, but it's right now the industry is doing a very good job of self-policing, our own industry. I think most of us are in agreement. The five ingredients that I talked about earlier, propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, nicotine, U.S. food grade flavorings, and distilled water should be the only ingredients used to produce e-liquids. Now, those can vary in flavors based on the U.S. food grade flavorings that you use. Any other chemicals, nicotine's a stimulant. I think putting another stimulant on top of a stimulant is a bad idea, and it just opens up the door for problems. So, we're not opposed to, like I say, reasonable, sensible regulations to make sure that the industry is safe and liquids are produced in a clean and safe manner.
Thank you. I have just one final follow-up with 3 parts. My question is there a compound of that liquid that should be made illegal? That's only one.
Sorry.
Is the industry this year proposing a piece of legislation that is working on that self-policing of ensuring that that the right compounds are used, the right liquids are used together? And the final thing is, how pure can that nicotine be that you sell?
I personally think over, and we've talked about this, over 36 milligram nicotine is, I don't think we need to go over that. Most of your heaviest smokers can get what they need out of 36 milligram nicotine. If we leave it at that level and leave that at the top and then go down as far as the already pre-bottled or pre-mixed nicotine. Consumers are not sold nicotine in excess of 36 milligrams. At that point in time, we want to stay well under that 50 to 60, and go from there. But what was the last part of your question?
The question about do you all have a piece of legislation to work on this self-policing?
Right. Right now, we started with the youth prevention. We think that's the most important thing. We want to get out there, get our youth protected, and show good faith that we're willing to work with legislators to get regulations in place. Our next step after that, we would like to sit down and work on reasonable legislation that would put regulations in place.
Seeing no further questions, Mr. Gore, thank you very much for your presentation. Next, we'll have Mr. David Culpepper, who will be speaking on how e-cigarettes helped him quit. Mr. Culpepper. Please.
Morning. I'm here to represent them because our stories are similar. Most of us started smoking at young ages, 13, 14, myself as young as the age of 11. was addicted to cigarettes from the time I was 13 years old. 18, 19 years old, wanted to enter the Marine Corps, could not do so because I couldn't pass the PT test and the physical. I've tried Chantix, I've tried gums, I've tried patches, all unsuccessful. Patches gave me horrible nightmares. Chantix made me depressed. Wellbutrin made me crazy, for lack of a better term. This industry has changed my life. It's changed the life of not just all of us, but millions of people in this country are going to grow old enough to see our grandchildren grow up and go to college. I used to have a horrible cough at night. Every winter, I would wake up in the middle of the night with a chronic cough that's so bad, I just wanted to die. And even with that cough, it was not enough to wean myself from cigarettes. I would hack a lung up for hours, and then 20 minutes later, I would light another cigarette. 14 months ago, I met a guy who had an e-cigarette. He let me try it. He said he had had some success with it. The very next day, I went to my local vapor shop. They taught me the ins and outs of vaping. They set me up with my first kit, the nicotine level that I needed. 3 days after that, I never touched another tobacco product. I can breathe. My blood pressure is down considerably, and the overall quality of my life has improved greatly. And I think that's what's most important, is that as an American citizen, it's all about your quality of life, and my quality of life now is outstanding. I couldn't do that 18 months ago. That would have resulted in me doubled over, coughing violently. Last year this time I took a trip to Lake Tahoe to go skiing. I had a layover in LAX, and my flight was delayed, and I had 10 minutes to get to my connecting flight, and I actually had to run across the airport. And I don't know if you're familiar with LAX, but it's a pretty large airport. And for the first time in 20 years, I ran what would probably be a quarter of a mile, and I could breathe, and I wasn't doubled over. And that's when I had noticed that these e-cigarettes had changed my life for the better. That's my story. I don't think we should limit this product to people. If we can help people, let's help people. Like even Sean said, if ultimately the goal is people are not smoking e-cigarettes or vaping e-cigarettes, great. You know, in a nutshell, that's all I really have to say is, like I said, I represent them. Everybody up there at one point in time was addicted to tobacco products, and none of us are anymore, and we all feel great now. Let's not change that.
Thank you, sir. First off, I need to apologize to you. I introduced you as Mr. David Culpepper and found out that I was mistaken, so I apologize for that. On behalf of Representative Derby, any questions of any of the House members, from the House members? Representative Mulready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make sure I heard you right. Did you say after 3 days of vaping that you never touched
I
tobacco?
bought my first vapor kit. I had a pack of cigarettes. It had 3 cigarettes left in it. And after day 3, I never touched another cigarette.
But you're still using the vapor products?
I still use the vapor product because I enjoy the vapor. I am at a 0 nicotine level. I am totally free and clear of nicotine and have been now for over 6 months.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any members of the Senate? Mr. Blakely, thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Next, we have up Dr. Leonard Lichtenfeld, who is Deputy Chief Medical Officer for the American Cancer Society. Dr. Lichtenfeld, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Crane, Representative Derby, ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee, and those in attendance today. Let me share with you that it's a pleasure to be with you. We have spent a good deal of time hearing a lot of information from a variety of people who all have had passionate and important stories to tell I am glad to be here today to share with you, in my role as the Deputy Chief Medical Officer of the American Cancer Society, some of the information that is important to us as an organization, and I'll also share with you is important to me personally. I've shared with some of you earlier today that gray hair is in fact gray hair. I've been around a long time, and I've been there, and I've heard, seen a lot of things, cared for a lot of patients, and had a chance to engage in a lot of discussions over health-related issues for many years. This being one that is certainly rising in importance, rising in frequency. Although I have to share, I tend to hear information today that's been to you as mature, as having reached finality, as being obvious and acceptable. And my discussion today is not so much to give you a lot of statistics, but perhaps to share with you at least a perspective as someone who's been in the practice of medicine, an oncologist as a primary care physician, someone who's been involved in the public health community, and perhaps to share with you some interesting information about where the American Cancer Society really stands on this particular issue. I will tell you that this has been an immense week for us, for a lot of people in the country, and frankly for a lot of people around the world. You may be aware that 50 years ago, the Surgeon General of 1964 released the first report to conclude the relationship between tobacco and cancer. At that time, we had pictures, actually, of folks from the American Cancer Society a couple of years before that who were sitting in meetings and smoking cigarettes. And I'm proud to say it was an American Cancer Society study, as noted in the Surgeon General's report. It was an American Cancer Society study that was one of the most important in terms of showing that relationship. But let's not think for one moment that the world suddenly changed that day. It did not. I was around, I remember I was commenting to one of your colleagues today about LSMFT. Lucky Strikes means fine tobacco. I was around when I heard the health claims, and we saw the health claims where your doctor says smoking will be beneficial for you. I was around when I went to medical school several years after the release of that report, when research was being supported by the tobacco industry to tell us that tobacco products were safe. I was around back in the late 80s when I sat on a radio show in Baltimore, and it was happened to be New Year's Day. I was the doctor who would show up and talk, and I made the comment that we were going to head to a smoke-free society at some point, and the host, a fellow named Joe Lombardo, who I still remember fondly and respect, said, "You've got to be kidding," started laughing, "it'll never happen." Well, the world did change, and it took 50 years for that to happen. And we learned a lot along the way. And what we learned was what we thought was not necessarily what was the truth. And it took a long time. It did take a long time and continues to take time, and takes effort, it takes research to show us to some degree where the truth really is. I'm not here to say that what you've heard today is all not true. That's not my purpose. That would be inappropriate, and frankly, in some respects, it would be wrong. But I'm also here to share with you today that you have to be somewhat concerned about whether the facts you hear are in fact the facts. It's not just about tobacco. I can tell you as a physician, one of the issues that has faced us and continues to face us today is the whole question of what is evidence-based medicine. When I was a medical student, when I was an intern, when I was a resident, and even up until today, I had my professors who were very well-known people, some of them, stand there and say, this is the truth. And now we find out many years later, after substantial research, that it was not the truth. So what do we know? Well, you've already heard. We know from tobacco that we lose 480,000 people a year from premature death as a result of using tobacco. We have learned, and this is why we're so concerned about the issue of tobacco. We have learned that those children who start using tobacco have a 50% chance, 1 in 2 chance, of dying of a tobacco-related illness. And we know, based on the Surgeon General's report that was released last week, that over 5 million of the young people in this country on the current trajectory are going to die from tobacco-related illnesses. And I will share with you as a physician, and I will share with you as a person, and I will share with you because every one of you in this room have had this experience. Everyone in this room knows someone or is someone who has suffered from a tobacco-related illness. And the sad reality is that we heard the same words in the 60s, the 70s. I sat in the legislature in Maryland. I had sit as a representative. I spent a lot of time there talking about the tobacco issues back then. And the reality is, how many lives could we have saved if we paid a little bit more attention to what we did know and paid a little bit more attention to what we did not know? We got to this point because fundamentally tobacco is an addicting product. It is an addicting product with a lot of carry-on substances, as we've heard earlier today, through the cigarette delivery mechanism. But the fundamental addicting product in tobacco is nicotine. We have known that for decades. We have known how serious an addicting mechanism, an addicting product nicotine is. And we also know, and I can tell you as a physician caring for patients, we know how hard it is for people to get off of nicotine. So those are the things that we know. And of course, we know that tobacco has carcinogens, cancer-causing chemicals, and we know tobacco has adverse effects on the heart. We know lots of things about tobacco. We know from last week that now liver cancer and colorectal cancer are related to tobacco, along with 15 other cancers. We know that tobacco is related to diabetes. We know nicotine is related to immune dysfunction. You've heard some of this information already today. We know these are dangerous products that when used as intended, and I think this is critical, when used as intended, tobacco has a 50% chance of leading to your death and an additional percentage chance of leading to serious disability. This is a product, when used as intended, is harmful. Of that, there is no question. So we're here today because we're talking about e-cigarettes. And we're talking about e-cigarettes because e-cigarettes are fundamentally, as referred to in the Surgeon General report and as testified earlier today, electronic nicotine delivery systems, ENDS, E-N-D-S. That's what they are. That's what they're intended to be. And we've heard a lot of discussions about what we know and what we don't know. And we've heard a lot of information suggesting that it's all tied up in a nice, neat package. Well, it's not tied up in a nice, neat package. At least that's my opinion. That's the opinion of the American Cancer Society. And it is the opinion of others, who, by the way, do not benefit directly from the taxation on cigarettes or other tobacco products. Our interest in this issue is an interest in the public health. We've heard a lot today that whether these systems are safe, the other comment is, are they not safe? Let me tell you that I spend a lot of time, perhaps like some of you. This is a great state. It's a large state. You get on the highway, you travel a lot. I live in Georgia, and I know I'm the expert from out of town. It's easy for me to come here. I understand all that, folks. But I spend a lot of time driving in Georgia and elsewhere, and I stop in a lot of places. And maybe about 2 years ago, a year and a half, I didn't write it down. I used to stop at a particular truck stop that I'm fond of, and they would have the little Enjoy stickers up there by the cash register. You may have seen this yourself. Go by that same truck stop today, and you have a huge display case as big as this screen. And I should take a picture of it to show you, with all the products. And that's there, with all respect to Mr. Shannon, because the big tobacco has gotten in the game. And they've gotten in the game because it is an alternative. It is a fundamental nicotine addicting product to get new customers not into the store, but into their business, who become lifelong customers because it's so hard to stop. That's the fundamental reason that we're here today. Now, let me tell you that I'm not here to tell you that electronic cigarettes are good. I'm not here to tell you that electronic cigarettes are bad. I'm here to tell you we don't know. And we don't know because it was interesting. I don't know if it was deliberate or not, but in one of the slides you saw today, it said that the flavorings are made in the United States. It didn't say that E-Cigs were made in the United States. And when these products are tested, we don't know that what's in them. We don't know consistently from product to product if it's the same thing. We don't know. We have no certainty. And let me tell you what we do know. And what we do know is that these companies, over time, they're smart. They're smart marketers. They know how to do it not necessarily out in the open. They know how to sell their product and know how to sell it well. They're successful companies with big margins and big profits. And the reality is they have now turned themselves to the e-cigarette world because that's a new opportunity. And when they developed the cigarettes, they modified the cigarettes in such a way that they gave them names like low tar, light. They redesigned the cigarette to make it more addictive. They redesigned the cigarette in such a way to make you inhale deeper. And the pattern of lung cancer in this country shifted from what we called centrally located squamous cell cancers to peripheral adenocarcinoma, which is a different form of lung cancer, still deadly, still serious. But it changed, we think, because they were smart in how they designed and, to quote, improve their product. And Surgeon General last week in their report made the same comment about these cigarettes. They're new to the game. They will redesign them. They will redesign the intent of making better customers out of the people who use them. And so let's not lose sight of what the past has been, what the present is, and what the future is likely to be. So let me very carefully share with you what the American Cancer Society does have to say about e-cigarettes. And I think it's important because you've heard comments made about where we stand. And I'm here to tell you where we stand. I'm here to tell you we don't know, as we stand here today, as I stand here today, we do not know the net potential benefit of these products as a smoke cessation device. That may come in light of everything you've heard today as somewhat unusual. We didn't say we're in favor of them. We didn't say we're opposed to them. But what we are saying is we don't have the evidence. We don't have the standardization. We don't have the studies. And in fact, we've heard a lot of studies. There's one that I'm going to bring up from the Lancet, a respected medical journal, published in the end of November, and showed there was no difference in smoking cessation between nicotine in e-cigarettes, non-nicotine or placebo-containing e-cigarettes, or patches. No difference. There are studies that say there is a difference, but we don't have the high-quality long-term data we know to support it. So we think could they be less harmful? Yes, they could, but we don't have the evidence. So we do not recommend e-cigarettes as a cessation tool. We do support FDA regulation. You've heard a lot about that. The reality is that the FDA has a regulation that they have probably promulgated, sitting in the Office of Management and Budget, and has not yet come out, and we expect it to come out soon. And we do support, at this time, that there be FDA regulation. We do support, we oppose attempts to change tobacco control laws. You've heard a lot about youth access. And let me just tell you, if you think for 1 minute, that the American Cancer Society is against youth access laws, let me just share with you that is absolutely not true. What we are against is the use of youth access laws and changes to that legislation that would otherwise undermine effective, proven tobacco control efforts. So let's dispel that right now. And until we know, let's understand that we do support FDA regulation. And let's also understand that we do support further research over the long term and understanding what the truth is as best we can determine through science with respect to the impact and effectiveness and harms potentially of this nicotine delivery device. That's what we stand for. So let me repeat. They may be less harmful, they may be effective in tobacco cessation, but we don't yet have the data. We don't recommend them as a cessation tool. We do support FDA regulation. We oppose attempts to change tobacco control laws in a way that would change the laws for e-cigarettes in a way, or for youth access, that would change existing effective tobacco control laws. We need more research. You know, we do know what works, by the way, in tobacco control. We do know that clean indoor air works. We do know that taxation and increased cost of access works. And we do know tobacco cessation programs work. Those things we do know. They have been shown. And as has been mentioned, the ability to stop tobacco use has been difficult for people. It's tough. But there's also the fact that today, over half of the people who ever use cigarettes in this country, over half who ever use cigarettes, of all that population, are former smokers. So notwithstanding the difficulty over time, over half the people who wanted to stop have been able to stop. That doesn't mean there may not be a role for e-cigarettes in tobacco cessation. What it means is that we don't have the proof at this point to really understand how they work best, and we certainly don't have the proof to understand what's in them. Now, a lot has been said, and I don't want to take too much of the time and belabor statistics, but a lot has been said today about data. And I brought my laptop up here. The reason I brought the laptop up, or not the laptop, but the iPad. In the old days, you used to wheel in a big pile of papers. You say, this is all the evidence. This is the Surgeon General's report. Today, I would have taken a 985-page document, or whatever is 1,000 pages. I would have slapped it on the thing and said, this is the evidence about tobacco. Now it's electronic. It's on my iPad, so please pardon me for that. But there's a lot of data in that Surgeon General's report that talks about e-cigarettes, talks about youth use, talks about crossovers. But you know what else it talks about? It talks about the fact we have so little really valid, systematic data. This is a new phenomenon. It wasn't in the surveys back in before 2011. They didn't measure it. They didn't measure the use of other products. Some of the decline is noted in the Surgeon General's report in tobacco use among children, among youth, is probably related to the fact that they're using other devices, such as small cigarettes, small cigars rather, that weren't measured. But they did talk about e-cigarettes. So let's just talk for a second. Of all the students in grades 6 through 12 who ever used an e-cigarette, the number went from 3.3 to 6.8% from 2011 to 2012. Now, you may come back and you may say, 6%, 7%, what the heck, it's 1 out of 14 students use an e-cigarette. One of the things we've learned in public health over the years that sometimes we didn't pay attention to was what we called early signals. Remember, these are new products. They're just being marketed. I was going to bring my telephone up because I was going to remind us all about social media and the access to information through social media, tweets, what have you. It's there. Promise you it's there. And the reality is when you see a doubling in a short period of time of the use of a product among young people, you have to be concerned because you don't know where it's going to be 4, 5, and 6 years from now. They talk about the fact that who started the cigarettes? Let's see. Among the all-student category, whoever used an e-cigarette, 9.3%, almost 1 in 10, never used a regular cigarette. It was their first device that they ever used. In middle school, 20.3% of the kids, middle school, who used an e-cigarette never used another cigarette before, never smoked a regular cigarette. The data goes on, 7.2% in high school in 2012 never used another cigarette before. And let's not forget, as I said before, the interchangeability. We've heard a lot. If I sat here today and I listened, and I came from another planet, I sat down and I said, this is all about tobacco cessation. It's all about tobacco cessation today and harm reduction, because that gets you in the door. It sounds good. It's a good message. It makes us feel good. It's not all about harm reduction. It's about how to create people who are addicted to cigarettes. I could go on. Time is short. Let me just say that just because we say it doesn't make it right. Just because we say it often enough doesn't make it truth. Just because we say it loud enough doesn't make it actually meaningful. What's meaningful is research, is evidence. Anecdote is not evidence. Possibility is not evidence. And it's hard to change public policy from what we know works because someone thinks and hopes it might work. Well-intended, honestly stated, meaningful, but it doesn't mean that we give up 50 years of progress on a hope. It means we keep on trying, we demonstrate, we fund the research, we do have to have the regulation for now, and when the evidence is firm that it shows us that it makes a difference, then we consider the change. Let me conclude with 2 points. First point, from the Surgeon General's report, and this is from the Surgeon General, given the level of evidence linking tobacco product use to ill health, all products containing tobacco and nicotine, all products, and that includes e-cigarettes and it appears in the section on e-cigarettes, should be assumed to be both harmful and addictive. This is sort of maybe a strange way to end it. But I commented earlier in my discussion about the fact of being a physician caring for patients. I commented about the fact that everybody in this room has been touched in one way or another by illness, whether it be by tobacco-related illness and unfortunately by cancer. And, you know, I've got a bandage on my nose. I got to tell you a little bit about it. It's a skin cancer, and it came from when I was a kid, and I taught swimming, and I got sunburned, and this is the result. I had another one removed a couple of months ago. It's a pretty messy thing, and frankly, I don't know the way it's going to turn out. My normal good looks are probably gone. I can't run for office. I'm out of the business, so don't worry. But the serious kidding aside, this is fixed. This is fixed. You sit with a patient who can't breathe, who can't walk. You sit with a patient who has a lung cancer, and they will not survive. And you want to do everything in your power as a person, as a physician, as someone who cares, to make it different, and you can't do it. And we have achieved a great deal to the point where the Surgeon General is now talking about what they call the end game, where we may get success. And I'm going to tell you that it is possible, and I don't want to be misquoted because I know it's going to show up elsewhere, it's possible that e-cigarettes may be part of that. May be part of that are the operative words. Let none of us ever have to look at someone and say we could have made a difference and not do our best to achieve that goal. Thank you.
Since you're going to twist my arm. No, well, okay. Then I have one question with 4 parts. I have somewhat, people are questioning my line of questions on on the previous speakers. They question my motive or something with Dr. Nitzkin. Am I saying it correct? And by no means was I trying to insult your intelligence or your work or all the things you have grown to be here today. And I want to thank you for being here. I do want to say this, is that my zip code, yes, there's a question. I do want to say this, but it's going to be right after my statement. 73111 zip code, which I represent, I live in, and Senator Johnson also lives in. It's in the heart of Oklahoma City. Matter of fact, it's just on the edge of the Capitol property. It suffers in the highest heart disease, stroke, diabetes, low birth weights, high infant mortality. And so the issue is personal, and I want my district to get healthier overall. So I've authored cessation legislation. I just feel like I need to lay that out to the public, that it's not a personal attack on vape shops or anything. I want my district to be healthier overall, so I ask questions. That's what my constituents sent me here to do. I asked Mr. Nitskin what his background was, and I've received your biography, and so I'm going to ask you the same question to be fair about, as I know that you work for the American Cancer Association, and so I know who paid for you to be here. And so I think it's just fair if you'd answer that question for me, for everybody, to make sure that they understand that my question is not a personal attack on them, but I ask the same question for background.
My background is simple about it, to the National Cancer Institute. I spent time in Baltimore as both a non-primary care physician. I have been in business, and I came to ACS back in 2001, initially as a medical editor, and moved on to be Deputy Chief Medical Officer. Today, I run a department called Cancer Control Science. That department is probably best known to you for the guidelines we've established for a variety for the prevention and early detection of a number of cancers. We also have guidelines for nutrition and physical activity. I've been engaged in a number of other activities in support of the society. You also asked the question of if any tobacco money or pharmaceutical money is supported me in my work. The answer is our department, of course, the American Cancer Society doesn't accept tobacco money. In fact, we have a clause in our contract that prohibits ourselves or our grant contractors from being tobacco related. And certainly in our department, the Cancer Control Science absolutely do not take any tobacco funding whatsoever. And if there's further questions about support of the organization, we can certainly provide more detailed information.
I'm about to recognize Senator Johnson for a question. I will inform Senator Johnson that we have several of our senators that have questions, so this will not be an open-ended list of questions that I will be recognizing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be extremely quick, but I do have two, if that's okay.
You have two.
And the first one is just a clarification, honestly. I'm glad to hear that the Cancer Society supports youth access laws, and I just wanted to get your commitment. I want to be clear. Last year, I had a very large bill. I stripped it down to just youth access. That's all it was. The Cancer Society opposed that, and all it said was that we should restrict these to, a cell of over 18. Members in this room actually voted against that, which I'm still befuddled by. I have a new bill that is standalone, just youth access. It's just going to say nobody under 18 can buy these products. And do I have your commitment that you guys will support that bill?
Senator, as you know, I'm not here from Oklahoma. I'm going to actually have to defer that one to my colleagues who are on the ground here in the state. What I am saying to you is that the American Cancer Society certainly does not support the sale of tobacco products to youth under the age of 1800.
Okay, so I cannot get your commitment that if there's a bill banning children from buying e-cigarettes, making it 18, that the Cancer Society will support that?
Senator, as you also know, there's a lot of nuances in a lot of bills, and there are a lot of issues that pertain to local considerations, and I'm not here to say whether we're going to support or not support a particular bill until we actually see it. We'll be more than glad to take a look at it, more than glad to talk to you about it. That's our position. We certainly are in agreement with that position, but I'm not going to stand here on behalf of the folks here in Oklahoma and make that commitment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The last question is, as a physician, we've heard about these studies. I know that there aren't that many studies on e-cigarettes. I'm not asking if they are good for you or if they're harmful, whatever. As a physician, would you prefer someone smoke an actual cigarette
or an e-cigarette? If they were going to do one, which one would you prefer they do? And the second part of that is, if the FDA does come out and puts product standards on these products, says what has to be in them, and says they are less harmful, will then the Cancer Society support harm reduction strategies in the state of Oklahoma?
Once again, we're going to take a look at the evidence as it exists at the point in time. I mean, the harm, the interesting issue about harm reduction, and I want to at least address this, because as the doctor well knows, and again, this is not an ad hominem. This is not intended to be that way. In fact, I know you've petitioned the AMA at one point. I'm sitting in the House of Delegates of the AMA, so we've heard this discussion before. Harm reduction is a matter of a very vigorous discussion within the tobacco control community. It is not an open or shut book. There are people who clearly believe in the harm reduction strategy, and there are people who are clearly opposed to it. You're asking what I would do as a physician. I'm going to tell you what I would do as a physician. I don't want my patients on nicotine, period. Nicotine is more than cancer. The relationship, the reality is the evidence of nicotine with respect to cancer is very limited at best. There are some suggestions but no proof. But there are a lot of other diseases that nicotine cause. I particularly don't want my pregnant patients on nicotine-related products. And as we all know, unfortunately, with teen pregnancy, a lot of folks, women don't know they're pregnant, and then the harm is already done. So there are a lot of issues to that. Ask me the question as a doc. The answer is I don't want them on a nicotine product at all. And as far as making a choice, that's a Hobson's choice. It's a tough choice to make, and one that we're going to have to see what the evidence shows us about what the risks are of e-cigarettes as well as a tobacco product.
Senator Brinkley, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first, just a clarification. You've referenced the words tobacco products and not wanting to see the change in the laws. Is it your definition that an e-cigarette is a tobacco product?
It's the definition of the Surgeon General in that. I'll be happy to provide you with that citation. I have it highlighted here. They do include nicotine and tobacco-containing products that are very specific about that.
Okay, two questions. First one is, I've got an employee. My opinion is very personal.
Mm-hmm.
I've got an employee who has spent years trying to quit smoking. She has done the patches. She's done the drugs. She's done everything she can do. She can't do it. Similar story we heard earlier. She gets an e-cigarette. Within 3 days, she stops smoking cigarettes. She has reduced the nicotine from a 24 to a 12, and it is changed. Given your testimony today, what would you tell her? Would you tell her that you would prefer her to keep smoking the cigarette and not go to the e-cigarette?
Let's be clear what my testimony was today. My testimony was today it may be a product that's useful in tobacco cessation, but we don't have the evidence. And there's evidence to suggest it may be helpful, but there's also evidence to say that it doesn't make a difference. Fortunately, your employee, if they're off cigarettes, terrific for her. And if she used it, there are people out there who use the patch. Terrific for them. There are people out there who use other medications that come off cigarettes. Terrific for them. The objective, obviously, is to get somebody off of the product. Having said that, what we need to know, what we don't know. There are people who go cold turkey. I mean, we all know different people have different ways that work for them. It may well be that this has a role in tobacco cessation. I didn't say that it did not. What I said was we need to have a better understanding of where it fits into the spectrum. We need to understand what the evidence is. We also need, once again, with reference to the Senator Johnson's question, we need to keep these out of the hands of kids because they're primary targets, shall we say. So if I was her physician, I would have a discussion with her. I'm glad that she's off of cigarettes. I'm not saying that it's not going to be. What I am saying is before we start changing the law, before we start taking things that have worked and take them away, we need to be sure because we run the risk of backtracking to where we were in the past.
My second question is you referenced earlier in your presentation that we know that taxation decreases usage.
Yes.
Is it your proposal that this product be taxed like a cigarette is being taxed?
Our proposal right now is that until we know for sure, until we have the evidence, we should not change what programs we know work. And taxations are among those programs. So yes, we would say taxation should be maintained. Am I saying that that would not be revisited at some point in the future? No, that's not what I said. But for today, yes, that is what I'm saying.
And the follow-up to that, I think, is obvious, which is, so it would be your presentation that it is the government's job to dictate or try to control, let me finish, please. The government's job to try to control people's behavior by charging them more money. And that's the government's job to do that.
We could have a long conversation over that particular issue as to what my personal opinion may be. But what I do know, and what I'm standing here to say today, is that we do know that increasing the cost of that pack of cigarettes makes a difference. It does make a difference. The data is very clear. Now, we could have the conversation about whether it's the government's role or not. Frankly, when it came to something that was killing 500,000 people in this country every year, disabling millions more, I think society does have a role to consider what the incentives are. The government does not say, do not do this. The government does not say, do not do this. The government says, these are incentives that we think as a society are important to change behavior that, when used as intended, kills 50% of the people. Yes, I do think government has a role in that.
And I think that's where we're going to disagree. I think there's personal responsibility that everyone has, and I would definitely say that my employee, my coworker, is far better off today than what she was before.
Thank you. Personal responsibility. Dumb.
Thank you, Doctor. I have concerns like you expressed. However, I'm a little confused. Like yourself, I've had thousands of patients over the years try to quit smoking. Most failed, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the percentage is, it's 90% or what it is, but most fail. What is the difference fundamentally between the nicotine products and help in cessation, and if I wouldn't allow me a follow-up, and what we're talking about today, and fundamentally, without this going into I don't know what, my answer is there is no fundamental difference. Do you have a opposing?
Very simply, I agree with what your premise is. The doctor previously made the same comment about 10% success rate, but there's another piece of data. Over half the people who smoked at one time are no longer smoking. So it may be 10% today on this quit attempt, but over time it does change. So even I, as a doc, had to have the lecture from public health folks to say you need to look at the big picture. And I think it's 53% of the sometimes smokers don't smoke today. The fundamental difference about many of the harm reduction products has to do with efficacy, proof over time.
But we're talking about nicotine.
Proof over time, and getting to the nicotine issue, what's actually in the product. What's actually there? What certainty do we have what's in there, the consistency, whether it be snus, whether it be chewing bags, chewing tobacco. This may be one example, and the nicotine, the e-cigarettes are another example. But they're absent that regulation, absent that knowledge, we have it on faith, and unfortunately faith is not sufficient to know.
But you know well from the pharmaceutical angle, nutritional supplement products, which this almost fits in, is innumerable of what might be in there. You have thousands and millions of products. You don't know what all is in there.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, to narrow in on this, to say all of a sudden we have a cessation product, I don't know. I'm a little confused by that. But thank you. Appreciate it.
I appreciate the question. I would suggest let's see what the evidence shows us.
Doctor, I have a question. I'm listening to what you have to say, and I think I'm arriving at a different conclusion than where you would like for me to be. But you talk about the fact that the e-cigarettes and the vapor cigarettes may or may not be effective towards helping with cessation.
Right.
And you say that it may or may not be less harmful. That what we need to do is we need more research. As I understand, that's what you were saying. When I hear that, my expectation from someone from the American Cancer Society would be that we provide stringent regulations in regards to this product, whereas my thinking is that if we don't know about this, we should be very leery of regulating something where we need to do more research before we start regulation. My question to you is, Are you advocating that we regulate this product, or are you advocating that we stop and wait for the research to come in before we regulate the product?
No, well, let me be clear, because I thought I said a couple of times. We do recommend that until we have the evidence, the body of evidence is sufficient to draw a conclusion that this product be regulated. Absent regulation, and actually we heard a comment from Mr. Shannon earlier today. They participate with the FDA in regulatory discussions with respect to regulation. Absent regulation, we don't have a certainty of what's in that product, and we really don't yet know for sure the safety issues that come with a particular product.
And we don't know that it's bad either.
It should be regulated, and we do think regulations should remain in place until we have evidence to the contrary. But I've also said that we will look at the evidence, and I'm sure the FDA will look at the evidence, and I'm sure other organizations are going to look at the evidence. We're not here to say yay or nay, but until we do believe that we should be safe rather than sorry. We've been through the tobacco experience. It took us a long time to get where we are, and to undo what we have done, we think that there's a high risk that we could potentially undo the successes that we've had if we change our regulatory posture at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have one question for myself so far, and I may come back later with this. I'll stand up for you. Is that the major concern that you have with these particular products is that you don't know if the nicotine is regulated between shop to shop to shop. So if the law would, one, limit those below the age of 18, and then thus require that the nicotine that is used is pharmaceutical grade, since I'm a pharmacist and so is Senator Sandridge, would the Cancer Society then be on board with something that would offer this as
He won't commit to nothing because he's not there for any particular reason but to be a mouthpiece.
And I'm plain spoken, so I'm telling you exactly how I word the stinking bill.
No, okay. And sometimes, depending on where I'm standing, I'm pretty plain spoken too. So let's see how I can respond to the question. And now I've interjected that, so I apologize for for the moment to try to recall specifically. We have not come out and said that these should be banned. I did not say that.
Liar. You're a liar to the people.
So if that's the implication, now, I did not say that we came out for a ban on these products.
I'm sorry if I implied that you said there'd be a ban. I'm just saying that it seems to me that the American Cancer Society has taken a stance that it's either no harm or nothing. And so what you stated earlier is that if you don't know what's inside these particular products, whether they're U.S. made or whether they're regulated through the FDA or even USP if you want to go to the vitamin world aspect of it. So my question is if we limit those below the age of 18 that they can't have access to, and then we require that these particular vaping shops use something that is regulated, would you guys be on board with it?
We would be on. There are several basic principal points that I made. We don't know if they're an effective harm reduction. They may be. But we want to know the evidence before we make a position on the value of these products in reducing cigarette smoking. That's what we said.
He won't take a position.
Again, we are in favor of FDA regulation, and we are in favor of continuing tobacco control efforts as they currently exist and applying those rules to e-cigarettes until we have more certainty. When we have that certainty, when we have that information, we will review our policies and make an appropriate recommendation at that time. But we do not believe that we are there today. As to any specific legislation, once again, it really comes down to seeing the legislation. It would be folly for me, just as it is for many people here, I'm sure, to say I'm going to commit to something until you understand what's in a bill or what's in a piece of legislation and give thought to what the implications may be.
And I guess I should be honest. I know that the members here know exactly my pedigree, but I come from a long line of medicine in my family. My father is an anesthesiologist. My mother's an RN. In fact, my younger brother is a DO. We do have one black sheep in the family. That is my sister, who happens to be an attorney. That was a joke, by the way. And I am a pharmacist. So I have a hard time with this have no harm value. We don't know the harm value. You yourself are a physician, and I know for a fact, because I've seen this in my dad's, before he went back to school to be an anesthesiologist, he was a family practitioner, the placebo effect.
Right.
If nothing else, then why would we not get on board with e-cigarettes to say, okay, we have an alternative for traditional cigarettes. We need to tax it less than traditional cigarettes. I don't care if you want to put $10 a pack on traditional cigarettes. I don't personally smoke. And if that puts people into the e-cigarettes, and then we have this placebo effect, if nothing else, why wouldn't we try to do that if the potential was to reduce the overall consumption of traditional cigarettes?
Once you cross that line and you normalize a behavior, I mean, it gets into, there is some additional information out there, and I don't know if the commissioner is going to discuss it or not. Normalization of behavior, acceptance of behavior, impact. It's not just about cessation. It's not just about harm reduction. It's about reintroduction to society of a behavior that potentially could recruit others. Number one, it might recruit others unwillingly.
Has it ever left?
Well, wait a minute.
Has smoking ever left our society?
Smoking has clearly changed in terms of perception, in terms of behaviors, in terms of youth uptake. I had a conversation.
I'm sorry. You said perception of it. I mean, if we're not taking anecdotal statements from people who have gotten off with e-cigarettes, then we can't use anecdotal evidence that it hasn't left our society. It has not left our society.
No, it has not left our society. It shows up in all sorts of ways, including movies and films and everything else.
I am so glad these guys are ripping him up.
With regard to the fact that young people growing up today, many of them have no idea about all the old pictures we used to show about people who smoke cigarettes, and they say, what's that all about? And yet, through social media and otherwise, the e-cigarettes are becoming known within the youth community. If we start to normalize that in the absence of the evidence, we will go backwards. We have the potential of going backwards and creating people who are addicted. It's not all about cessation. It's not all about harm. That's the convenient argument. But it's about reintroducing an addictive substance that has a cross-addiction potential. And then the concern is...
Should be recorded. Yep.
The concern is the cross-utilization of tobacco products. And we've seen that happen with other tobacco-related products, other nicotine-containing products, that cross-relationship is a significant one, and the cigarette becomes merely, may become entry-level drug. There are people here in the CDC survey who did not use other tobacco products and used only e-cigarettes. So we know that youth, that does happen. And we also know that it may be a convenience item. That is, it may promote continued nicotine and smoking behavior because it allows you to use something in a place or a time that gets you in a position from a place where you can use a tobacco or smoke until you go to another place to smoke. So there are all sorts of implications here. These are not simple issues. Not just a matter of pharmaceutical grade. You yourself know, you both know as pharmacists, that there have been a number of instances where we've had products that have been labeled as being X and turn out to be Y. And we need to have some certainty that we know what we're dealing with here. We really need to have the evidence to show how people are going to behave. We really need to be concerned about normalizations of behaviors, and we really need to be concerned about not backtracking on the gains that we have made, and we have made gains.
I'm done with my questions. Anyone else?
I'm done with my questions.
Representative.
In other words, this guy's an idiot. Anybody else want to talk to him? He's stupid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll keep it very brief. When we started this study and the more we were talking, I'm one of those black sheep lawyers, by the way. We tend to make things pretty simple. And this came down to me, 18 minor access and taxes. Are we going to tax this product high or are we going to tax this product low? I think what I hear the American Cancer Society's position, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, that you don't like the product, that when you talk about normalization of behavior, it appears to me that regardless of the studies that come out, it is still going to be simulating the act of smoking. I mean, that's not going to change. So I just want to make clear if we're talking about this issue later on down the road, and I was in one of those committees where we voted down a youth access only bill. Shocked me. But I want to make clear that where do you stand? Is the fact that it's normalizing it so it's never going to be okay? Is that
He won't commit to a
Senator,
stance.
I think you're, with all respect, sir, you're limiting to saying that is the only thing we're talking about. We are talking about, first of all, I want to come back to something I said a moment ago. I didn't say I was against e-cigarettes. I never said that once today. I've said that they may have a role in harm reduction. They may have a usefulness.
Quote,
what I'm saying is we're not there
quote,
yet, that we don't know, and that we run a risk of changing rules, changing regulations that could undo an awful lot of good that we have done, of millions of lives we have saved over time because of those rules. But please do not, listen to what I said carefully. I said they may have a role in harm reduction, but we don't have the evidence yet. I did not say ban them. I did say youth access should be prohibited. And somehow that keeps coming back to me as I say I'm against them or whatever. We don't say we're for them or against them. I didn't say that.
He hasn't said anything except
what I
for
said is we need to know more.
Blah.
Until we know more, we better proceed with caution. That is our position.
And more blah.
Brief follow-up. So is it your position that lowering the tax rate on e-cigarettes would increase their usage, thus create an outcome that the American Cancer Society is against?
I think that the country may be against it. I think it has the potential to increase the use, the unintended consequence of reducing taxation on e-cigarettes is to create an unintended consequence of increased use of other tobacco products and the cross-utilization of those products that could be very problematic and lead to serious harm and death. Yes, we do believe that. At this point in time.
Final follow-up. So as I understand it, your answer, the reason you're against the additional usage of e-cigarettes is because you're afraid of cross-usage for traditional tobacco products, but not because of your fear of the actual usage of the e-cigarette itself.
There's too much we don't know. There's too much, as the Surgeon General says, there's too much we don't know. We need to proceed with caution. There's too much information that we don't have that we need to have.
And this really is my final follow-up. I'm just trying to nail it down so I understand.
I feel like I'm in the jury box. Not in the jury box, the witness box, but that's okay.
If you were cross-examination, I'd be mean. I'm always nice up here. Now, I want to make sure, I really want to make sure I understand. I mean, on this, I'm not trying to be argumentative at all, but I think you did nail down the bottom line is, other than cross-usage, you're saying there's no evidence other than usage of other tobacco-based products as to e-cigarettes themselves. You can't give me anything that they themselves are harmful or anything that they themselves are not harmful.
We don't know.
So yes.
That's the bottom. No, wait a minute. Wait, no, sir.
Well, I don't know because you didn't let me finish, so I don't know if you heard my question. So maybe I will be a shade more aggressive. What I'm trying to tell you is we don't know one way or another, period. You can give me no studies that say their usage is harmful, and you can't give me any studies that say the usage is not harmful. Is that correct?
What I can say to you is that there are studies out there. You've heard some of them today, and we can pull some studies out of the literature, but we do not have sufficient scientific evidence at this point to draw the conclusions that we need, the sufficient evidence that we need to draw the conclusions we need to draw. That's what I'm saying at this point.
Blam! Bitch pudding!
One final question that I've been getting from several of my members. Does the Oklahoma Cancer Society, American Cancer Society, receive any TSET money to fund it?
I'm going to have to turn to my folks here, and they're saying no, they do not.
Okay.
I call bullshit. I call bullshit on that.
Doctor, thank you very much. I appreciate the lively and informative question and answers.
I bet we can find some of that TSET money.
Next, like to invite to speak Dr. Terry Klein. Dr. Klein is Secretary of the Oklahoma Health and Human Services and is Commissioner of Oklahoma's Health Commissioner for the state of Oklahoma. Dr. Klein.
Great, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. I'd also like to thank the other presenters today for the useful and interesting information. I'd like to start by commending all of those individuals who are here on the floor, as well as those individuals who are in the balcony, who are committed to decreasing tobacco use in the state of Oklahoma. We know tobacco is the #1 preventable cause of. I know that there are many people who share my passion, my commitment to save lives, to prevent those 6,000 lives a year that are lost to the #1 preventable cause of death, and that is the use of tobacco cigarettes in the state of Oklahoma. I think the individuals who know me in this room certainly know that I'm passionate about that commitment. I'd like to thank Senator Crane for setting a few limits around some of the more perhaps discouraging comments, but Senator Crane is new in this business. And I will say that when these discussions initially began, the allegations were actually that we were sleeping with big tobacco, which I find very ironic and interesting. People with the tobacco industry found that interesting as well, until it became known that there actually are the 3 large tobacco companies that have significant financial interest in E-Cigs, as you heard today. I didn't hear that allegation in anyone's comments today that we're sleeping with the tobacco industry. It has also been alleged that we're sleeping with the pharmaceutical companies. So you can put the whole breadth, those for, those against, which is really an age-old tactic to neutralize any comments anyone can make, because you're seen as having that conflict of interest. It pretty much covers the waterfront. And again, something that we are used to. Let me be very clear. Given the deadly impact of tobacco products in our state, we need to find absolutely every single tool that is available to us to decrease the use of this product. Every single tool. I have a caveat with that. I want to know the risks and the benefits of those tools before we have individuals ingesting things into their bodies or potentially doing things that could be harmful to their bodies. Right now, I don't know what that science will tell us. Actually, in the example that Mr. Gore gave, and I want to be clear, we're not looking for zero-risk interventions. I mentioned one of the medications that's used for tobacco cessation that actually has been found to have elevated suicide risk. I want to know that before I use that product. And I might not know that if it were not for FDA and other regulating bodies that have ensured that there is research to tell me what the risks and the benefits are of that product. And then I will make an informed decision based on that individual data that we have. So it's back to the individual responsibility. I want to know so I can make an informed decision about that product. We don't have that data available to us today. So there was some conversation about conflict of interest for the State Department of Health as well as the Tobacco Settlement Endowment Trust. Let me, as we've had full disclosure, and I appreciate the full disclosure of every single speaker who's been up here. So let me disclose that the Oklahoma State Department of Health receives 0.3% of its budget is related to tobacco funds. That's 0.3%, less than 1/2 of 1%. It actually comes to the Oklahoma State Department of Health. I know in my conversations with Tracy Strader, who's the Executive Director of the Tobacco Settlement Endowment Trust, she's been a little bit puzzled over these allegations and comments because this is actually an endowment that receives payments from the Master Settlement Fund. And as anyone knows, Oklahoma did a great thing many years ago when it established the endowment fund, and that was that it would not spend the capital, it would only spend the interest. So if they stopped receiving funds from the Master Settlement Agreement today, they would still have the amount of money that they have available to them to fund programs across the state, because those come out of the interest. So I just wanted to be clear about that. And no, I do not receive any other financial support from either pro-tobacco groups or con-tobacco groups. So I just wanted to be clear about that. So thank you for that opportunity. What you've heard today is just a sampling of a conversation that could continue not just the rest of today, and I know there are many people who would rather go to lunch than to hear comments the rest of the day. This conversation literally will take place for years. This is what we're going to hear. This is what we know from the tobacco industry. When you hear comments like we just don't have sufficient information, that's because this research is really in its infancy. It is in the early stages. And what we need to be wary of is doing a tit-for-tat comparison. This study tells me this, that study tells me this. This study tells me something else, this one does something else. Unless you are a researcher who really understands the intricacies of that research, the methodology, the samples used, the populations that are being appropriately researched, the materials that are being used in those analyses, it is risky business. So what I would encourage the legislature to seek is a body of research. This is really a substantial amount of information that helps sway you in your thinking either one way or the other, or to take some position in the middle. A substantial body of research before making decisions. And again, this is just the beginning of that type of conversation. As we saw with tobacco, I mean, there were articles that came out that were absolutely adamant about the safety of tobacco products. Absolutely adamant. These are actually good for you and are healthy, right? I think we've learned to be more cautious in our reaction to research. And then at the same time, you maybe had those that said it was absolutely safe. But it wasn't until we saw that emergence of a body of research that decisions were actually made, and the Surgeon General released his report at that time. Now, the idea of harm reduction, that is not a new concept to public health, and it's certainly not a new concept to the field of addiction. So for those of you who don't know, I was the Commissioner of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services for 6 years in the state of Oklahoma. I know a little bit about addiction. I was the administrator for the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, the federal agency charged with overseeing those programs. I know a little bit about addiction. I know a little bit about harm reduction. Let me give you a couple of other examples of harm reduction programs, the types of things that we've seen in public health, and they don't exist here in the state of Oklahoma. They haven't been very popular in the state of Oklahoma, but they do exist in other places. One is methadone programs for people who are addicted to heroin. Now, this is a program that it's interesting because the goal for that, and I'm hearing some similarities today, so I'm a little bit conflicted about what the goal is the goal to help people quit nicotine and to quit tobacco entirely, or is it simply to substitute one addiction delivery system for another addiction delivery system? So I'm a little bit confused in just what I'm hearing in terms of the goals from some other groups. Methadone makes no bones about it. They're not trying to get people off of heroin. They are simply substituting a different drug that has fewer risks. It has fewer adverse outcomes. So methadone programs are promulgated in many parts of our country. But there is no deception. There is no misalignment. It is very clear this is really addiction in its purest form, and the substitution of one delivery system for another delivery system. Another example, this one's really controversial, so I really had to put this one out here, and that's needle exchange for heroin examples, for heroin addicts. So in this harm reduction model, many organizations, many communities have put in programs where they will actually provide clean needles to IV users. Again, the goal is not to try to reduce the actual use of IV injection use or the injection. It is to stop the spread, to reduce the harm that we see from dirty needles. And actually, there are some pretty promising, encouraging results from that. But then you get into this whole controversy about whether it makes sense to actually support an ongoing addiction for someone. We know in reality the ultimate goal is for someone to be drug-free. Right? We want to be tobacco-free, heroin-free, whatever the example is. This idea of harm reduction is not new. It's really not. Now, it's new because in this conversation with e-cigarettes, but it's not new to public health. It's been around for decades. Part of the conflict that we have and that we see with the information we see is the lack of this clear, overwhelming body of evidence. We will hear information that is both pro and con. The thing that makes this so real for us is we're talking about products that we put into our bodies. And somehow there seems to be this different standard when we're talking about kind of tobacco-related products. When we have a pill. Now, if we had a pill that was being pushed right now, and it wasn't regulated by anybody, and it was claimed a harm reduction product, I'm guessing this conversation would be a little bit different. I want to know what's in that pill. I want to know what's in that pill before I put that in my body. I want that assurance. Again, not risk-free. I just want to know what those risks are. And I want to know each and every time, whether I'm taking it from your pharmacy or this pharmacy, I want to know what that product is. Because the claims are the same. But I have no assurances of consistency of that product with our current system. So why are we worried about this in the state of Oklahoma? Well, we're seeing from our youth tobacco survey a very high prevalence rate of e-cigarette use in the state of Oklahoma. So with this survey, found that 7.8% of high school students, 7.8% of high school students are reporting that they have used e-cigs in the last 30 days. 17.9% tell us that they've ever tried one. So they're kind of experimenting with that. But 7.8% for the last 30 days. 2.7% of OK middle school students are telling us that they have used an e-cigarette in the last 30 days, and 6.6% have ever tried it. Those are very high numbers relative to the numbers that we're seeing across the country from CDC and others. In some ways, I wonder, is that really a surprise in a state that still has a very high tobacco rate? And yes, it is progress, and yes, we have seen change. And yes, we have gone from 47th to 39th in terms of our tobacco prevalence rate, and that is progress. The question is, are we simply substituting with this harm reduction model one addiction for the other? In the Lorillard presentation, we had the pie chart, which came back again in response to a question. 44% do not use less in terms of cigarette use at all. 36% report they use some less. But then we have 20% who completely replace, not completely quit, but completely replace that product with another product. And I may be wrong in interpreting that, Mr. Shannon, but that was the way that that was read. And I think if it was a 20% quit rate for tobacco, I would have seen 20% quit rate for tobacco. So we need to be clear about our goals. And that's why I really want to thank everyone who shares that passion to decrease the use of tobacco. And I want to make sure that we have accurate information when we're making those decisions. So the governor made the decision to sign an executive order that would ban the use of e-cigs on all state property. There was some comment about that overstepping those responsibilities. And in the written comments from Mr. Gore, actually saying she's just getting bad advice. Actually wasn't accusing the governor of anything bad, but just saying she's getting bad advice. Well, I would say that the governor is exercising her responsibility as the governor of our state and the head of the executive branch, who has responsibilities for state employees, the largest employer in the state, across this great state. And she's joining a pretty notable group of other executives who have made similar decisions. So Lowe's, which many of us shopped there, I was there this weekend, has made that commitment for all of their properties to be E-Cig free. Starbucks, the majority of airlines. I mean, this isn't an arbitrary, one isolated executive who's making a decision. We have national corporations who have a presence across the entire country, who employ thousands and thousands of employees who have made similar decisions. And right here in the state of Oklahoma, a little closer to home, although we have those stores here as well, we have over 130 businesses. Again, other organizations in our state who have made similar decisions to ban the use of e-cigs on their properties for their employees. And I'm just going to read a sampling of those, and then I'll be done, Mr. Chairman. Those include, in the Muskogee and Sequoyah County area, groups like State Farm Insurance, Violet's Flowers and Gifts, Jody's, Scott's Furniture Store has a couple of different sites, White's Jewelry, Arvest Bank in Salisaw, a number, very diverse group of businesses who have made similar decisions to ban e-cigarettes. Muskogee Inn and Suites, Muskogee Chamber of Commerce. It's an interesting list to really look at those groups. Responsible employers who are successful employers who have made those decisions. In Oklahoma County, just point out Oklahoma City Community College, which actually made the decision to ban e-cigs before the governor's executive order was signed. They made the decision on their own. So a shout in their direction, as well as OSU, not in Oklahoma County, but at the main campus, which the week before the governor had signed the executive order also made a decision, the regents made a decision to ban e-cigs on those campuses. Back to Oklahoma County, Oklahoma Blood Institute, American Fidelity, Lopez Foods, many of these organizations are well known to you and well respected. Okmulgee County, Yeager Dental, First Presbyterian Church, Torbit Printing, United Furniture, Neal's Furniture, the list kind of goes on. The last county that I'll mention is Pushmataha County, Zenji Services, a bunch of daycares who have made those decisions. Pushmataha County Hospital, Security Bank, United Country, and then Tulsa, Senator Crane, I threw you for you. St. Francis Healthcare System has decided to be e-cig free. Tulsa Job Corps, Explorer Pipeline. You can see there are many, many more in Oklahoma who made similar decisions to ban e-cigs, and really making the decision that we have a responsibility as employers to further the safety and health of our employees as well as the visitors to those sites. And in the state of Oklahoma, for many state agencies where you have individuals who are visiting, pregnant women, young children, others, that absolutely made sense. So I'd like to commend the governor for her leadership, which actually mirrors leadership from many well-respected businesses across our state. So this year, the Oklahoma State Department of Health is supporting legislation from Senator Frank Simpson, who offered legislation to prohibit the sale of e-cigs to minors. We fully support that legislation. It is supported on the House side by Representative Omey. And if that legislation were to pass, and I will point out that I have not heard one group today voice any opposition to that legislation, that is only legislation related to E-Cig that this department is supporting this year. That's the only one that we've talked about from last year. We will be joining 27 other states. You heard that mentioned earlier, that the majority of states have actually prohibited the sale of e-cigs to minors. I would like to thank all of the legislators for their support of that bill or similar bills that are really ensuring that our, as you heard, our young developing brains are protected from the risk. Now, as this body of evidence emerges, closing comments, I'm actually hopeful that there is a harm reduction role for e-cigs. We need absolutely every single tool available to us. 6,000 people continue to die in the state of Oklahoma every single year, and it's just not acceptable. So let's make sure that we have a product that is safe, that's effective, that we know the risks associated and the benefits associated with that, that they've been clearly researched, clearly understood, and then the public is clearly informed about this product, which could be delivered in a uniform fashion, so we have complete confidence in the products that we're ingesting or taking in to our bodies. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will conclude my comments and happy to address any questions you may have. Thank you.
I guess it's just you and I. Oh, no. Representative McDown, you have a question? No? I got one question, is how much of the TSET money does the state receive or the health department receive every year?
We work in close alignment with TSET. I don't know of any direct funds that we're receiving from TSET. I'm happy to research that for you. I know that there is a lot of TSET money that goes out. I know that there are some positions that are jointly funded where we each contribute to that. So I believe that there is some funding that comes from TSET to the Oklahoma State Department of Health, and I'd be happy to provide you with a more detailed response to that.
I would appreciate it. I also would like to know exactly, besides smoking cessation, what else does the TSET offset for you, and whether the programs are relying upon
road repairs
money so that it is implemented and maintained by the state of Oklahoma in that said report.
Okay, could you repeat the question just in terms of
I know that we give, I'll tell you the numbers, $221 million from TSET every year, and that the state appropriates that, the legislature does. We give that to you, the Department of Health. Of that money, I would like to know what programs are being funded through that said money.
So you're talking about the tobacco tax money or TSET money?
All and above.
Okay. So I think you may have been out of the room, Representative Derby, when I
do that every once in a while.
Spoke earlier about this department receives 0.3% of our overall budget from tobacco taxes. That's why I was asking for clarity around your question. And we do have programs across the state that are working with local communities. That's how those funds get used, so that communities are informed and can make decisions on their own about what's right for them as an individual community.
Because they can't do it on their own. Government help.
Happy to do that.
That makes no.
I'm done.
Senator Brinkley, you're recognized.
You, Chairman, and I both know that we've for years. None of this is actually directed to you. I do have, and as far as going to disclaimers, I've never smoked. I don't smoke. I don't like smoking. Though this is not fighting on behalf of smokers. From a philosophical standpoint, we talked throughout the day about some. There's been research presented, and there has been people saying we don't know enough about the product. But there's a lot of other problems in this that we do know enough about. We have pardon the pun, we have a huge obesity problem in this state. But I've not seen proposals to ban the sale of sugar products, high-fat products, or high-calorie products in the state offices. that may be done by the end of the day. Now that I brought it up, so why this product? Why all the products that harm and affect people in our state that we know that causes a problem? Why are we targeting this product when by everyone else is sure we have anecdotal evidence to help avoid smoking? Why are we trying to ban its use on state property and not everything can harm everybody else that we come in contact with?
Thank you for that question. As Senator Crane is well aware, our department has what's called the Oklahoma Health Improvement Plan, which has 3 flagship issues. These are the 3 critical issues that are impacting our state. One is tobacco use, the second is obesity, and the third are children's health issues. This particular issue, so we are addressing obesity issues, not with that particular legislation, but in other ways, farm-to-school programs, making sure that kids have access to fresh fruits and vegetables, and a number of other things like that. Also looking at opportunities for increased physical activity. So you may not see legislation that's actually mandating that, but we have a lot of communities that are actually mobilizing around that and doing good things around obesity. So it is something that we care about. This particular issue falls under both the tobacco banner and the children's health. So you will note, again, our focus for this particular bill is around prohibiting the sale to minors because we're concerned about children's health. So you can get into the controversy about whether this is or is not a tobacco product, and I think we'll hear more from the FDA on that particular issue. But because it contains nicotine, which is a tobacco-derived product, it has often been grouped in that. And because in the claims that we're hearing, it is being directly associated with tobacco use, that puts it in that category as well.
Follow up? I'm trying to form this in I feel like I'm on Jeopardy, doing it in the form of a question. I still don't understand why it is the government's responsibility to try to mandate and legislate behavior. I completely agree with you that we should educate people and we should lead them to understand or help them to understand what they need to do for their own health. But it seems like this is part of this greater movement that we see in this country, where we see New York banning big gulps, that we see people trying to add taxation on the Big Macs because it's not healthy. This is the question at the end of the day, is at what point is it ultimately the individual's responsibility to make the choices that they choose to make for themselves to use a legal product, and we allow them the freedom to do that?
It's a great question, and one that is not specific to this issue. We have, as a collective body, as a state, we are against, and the legislature has put that into law, so actually you determine what is that individual responsibility and what is not, around issues like drinking and driving, right? I mean, it's very clear. Should you be able to just go out and drink as much as you like and get behind the wheel of a car? Absolutely not. Why not? Because we know that that puts other people's lives at risk as well as your own. So you have a say in that. A harm reduction model, by the way, you would not ever propose, I hope, that we would support legislation that would encourage people to drive 35 miles an hour if they're drunk instead of driving 55 miles an hour if they're drunk. They're both bad, right? So on that one, we don't want to just encourage a lower level of risk with that. We want that banned altogether, right? So you can drink within a certain limit. If you cross that limit, you're breaking the law if you get behind the wheel of a car and you have your keys with you. So this is not unfamiliar territory for the legislature at all. we have constant discussions about kind of freedom versus security. Completely different. So this is not just a public health issue. So you have some individuals who say, I can give you kind of a risk-free security in our country. Well, at what expense, right? I want to see every email. I want to monitor every conversation. I want to make sure that I have access to all information that's out there. But I can decrease the risk of some sort of terrorist threat by doing all those things. So it tilts in the other direction. And some people might be comfortable with that. Others are not. So it goes back and forth. The same is true for this. New York may well be able to pass that law. That's not going to pass here. I'm not going to propose that. Would that be proposed in other areas? It might. And then at the end of the day, it's this body that actually makes that determination around that individual responsibility. In public health, we want to provide opportunities for healthy options. We really do. So if this meeting had been taking place 20 years ago, and you and I are committed to being healthy, and we're enclosed in this room, and there's a cloud of smoke in here, it's very difficult for us then to make that healthy choice. That choice, that right, has been taken away from us because other people were allowed to smoke in these chambers. And by the way, the same was true at the health department 20 years ago. These discussions could have taken place in smoking.
And this will be my last follow-up, I promise. It sounds, where I would totally agree with you, is the issue of drinking and driving, the issue of secondhand smoke, because you're making a choice that from anything that we've seen so far, that an e-cigarette, which puts forth a water vapor, is impacting the people next to you. So it just seems like this, we passed legislation on this floor, resolutions on this floor, because we believe the federal government has overreached in the areas of EPA and trying to control people's lives. If you were making the argument or had great evidence that the use of an e-cigarette affected everyone who was around them, just like a regular cigarette and tobacco, I would perhaps agree with you. But it seems like this is an overreach of the state government to try to control behavior of a product that an individual chooses to use for themselves and does not seem to impact anyone else around them. Is that a true or false statement from my perception?
There is some research that the vapor that is emitted does not contain just water. It actually contains other chemicals. And that's one of the areas where we believe additional research is needed. And that's why I'm hopeful about this particular product actually figuring out how you can minimize that impact on bystanders, because it's one of the issues that I struggle with in really figuring out how can someone safely use that and not impact the pregnant woman who's sitting next to them. And that's why we've discouraged in our advisory, which, by the way, encourages caution if you are using those particular products, and discourages use in enclosed spaces, because we just don't have that level of confidence yet that it is safe.
Senator Rob Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make this brief. First, I wanted to thank you for being here and thank you for the service to our state.
Thank you, sir.
And I just had a quick question, same one I asked just a second ago, and could not get a commitment. But I'm glad to hear that you support the Youth Access Bill. I have, the Youth Access Bill, and I just want your commitment that as it goes forward, that you guys will be supportive, because there were people in this building and people in this room that tried to get that killed as a standalone bill. And I just need your commitment that from your position, if it's just standalone youth access, there's nothing else involved, that you are fully supportive of that.
What I would say is that we have supported legislation that would ban the use of e-cigarettes to minors. We would love to have you support the bill that the department is behind and clearly understands. If there is additional information that we can provide to do that, we need all the support that we can get for that, and we would greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Senator Sharp. I will remind the members that following Dr. Klein's presentation, we have Mr. Jeff Steyer and Dr. Theodore Wagner. So you all feel free to talk and question as long as you want. We're here until we're through.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Klein,
Wow. We're
you
here
still say that
till
the
we're
opinion is out on the vapor as to whether it is toxic or not toxic, basically. But you would say, what I'm gathering from your statement here, just to keep it clear in my mind, that you would consider it sound medical practice that if someone is smoking cigarettes and e-cigarettes, if you are able to use e-cigarettes, as although we're not, the opinion is still out, the jury is still out on so whether e-cigarettes are harmful or non-harmful. We know, at least we think they're less harmful than cigarettes. You would still follow that practice to recommend e-cigarettes. Is that correct?
I would not recommend that. What I would recommend for individuals who are committed to quitting tobacco use would be to look at those products that we know the risks and benefits of as tobacco cessation products that are available today. We clearly understand those risks. I would recommend that those individuals use those products.
Senator Standards for question.
The ones that have 1,000 different side effects, such as anal leakage,
sure. Although I'm a little
depression,
confused, I don't know a lot of
thoughts of suicide.
I hear that a lot up here, and every time I hear that, I wonder if we say we don't know, so we don't do anything about it. I mean, the question is, if I could have a follow-up too, but the question is, we're talking about e-cigarettes. When I look at that from a pharmacy point of view, you really only have one active ingredient there. All the rest, as you know, are inert. These are irrelevant. Nicotine is a naturally occurring substance. We've used that, studied that, probably almost more than any other chemical. And it's not even requires a prescription. We can compound with that, give it out without a prescription all day long at a pharmacy. So what is it about that, just succinctly, that we don't know? I'm just confused on what. I understand the initial use. That bothers me too, and some things that we're talking about bothers me. But when you talk about moving from a cigarette that we absolutely know kills you to something that I can tell you from a pharmacy point of view is practically harmless, why are we saying I don't know? I don't understand that confusion. I can see if you say first entry like the good doctor for American Cancer Society says first use. I have a problem with that. But if we just talk about cessation, what is it that we don't know about that, if you wouldn't mind?
So we have a product that is on the market that is, and in the first presentation I didn't hear exactly that the tobacco companies are marketing this as a tobacco cessation product. I did not hear that, and it was very clear. I'm going to talk about harm reduction when we do this, but I am not marketing this as a harm reduction tobacco cessation product. So that is because that has not been approved as that product, so that claim cannot be made today by those manufacturers. So I have a problem with a product that is being manufactured, that is being distributed across our country, where there's a groundswell of support and claims that are not supported by research and data, by that body of research and data. So what we want to avoid is a situation where 5 years down the road say, oh man, we really wish we had known that because X, Y, or Z. We don't know at this point. It's like product safety testing for toys. We don't put the toys out on the market, see how many kids die, and then say, I think we need to study that there toy. We don't do that. We want to ensure that those toys are safe before they end up in the hands of kids. So that's my concern.
Thank you, sir. Well, I have to go like my colleague, Senator Brinkley. Philosophically, though, I mean, I don't really see the dangers. Let me ask you another question. The analogy you make with the methadone is harmful. I mean, we wouldn't want to go out and start people on methadone. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. Do you think that, I mean, is there another analogy that you could use? Like, I mean, I almost think of it as a caffeine going to more like a caffeine addict. I mean, the relativism between cigarette smoking and something else, almost in my mind, goes from something very harmful to like caffeine or Coca-Cola. I mean, we should get people off of that, but I don't know. I'm not saying e-cigarettes are totally great, but I'm just wondering if I don't know.
I think you're asking a fantastic question. We heard it referenced earlier, this kind of continuum of risk. And the question is, where does this lie on this continuum of risk? So I think there's uniform agreement that it is less harmful than combustible tobacco. So I think I heard that uniformly. I don't believe I heard anyone say that this product is harmless. I don't believe I heard anyone say that. I heard them say that it's less harmful than cigarettes. So what is that level of risk? Where does it lie on that level, that continuum of risk? It's a fantastic question that has not been answered yet.
I want to go back to that piece of legislation that you were talking about earlier. Does that remove the taxation aspect from the legislature and put it to an unelected board?
The legislation that we have been supporting doesn't address taxes at all.
Isn't there one out there that does do that? It removes it from the legislature and put it to an unelected board as far as dealing with taxation on cigarettes?
I don't know anything about that. That's not the bill that we have supported from Senator Simpson.
Earlier we had Michael Shannon put up a pie chart, and then he put up a bar graph behind that. And he talked about the vapor, going back to Senator Brinkley, as far as if Senator Brinkley is vaping over there, how much of that would I ingest? And sometimes I have this weird knack of just remembering where the chart is and what numbers are. And it said less than 0.006 milligrams. So in my analytical mind, that's 6 nanograms. Before I was elected back in 2006, I was a forensic chemist for the Highway Patrol of Missouri and in Tulsa, which means I had to go to court and testify. And I know for a fact that anything below the minimum threshold, I can't testify. And that minimum threshold is well above 6 nanograms. And I have a hard time putting this together in my mind, that if I got less than 6 nanograms coming from Senator Brinkley from over there, that I'm going to be harmed from it the 15 feet that I'm away from him. And I can't put that into my computer, if you will, my mind, and make that adjust and make it compute, because for us to go out there and absolutely ban something, I mean, it worked out great during Prohibition. I mean, I love NASCAR as much as anybody, but the fact of the matter is we made a black market out there for alcohol because we had the infinite stupidity at Washington to ban something. While I enjoy NASCAR today from it, the fact of the matter is we found out that we were wrong. And for us to go out here and absolutely ban e-cigarettes from people making the decisions, I think it's a fool's folly. I have a hard time justifying that at any level of where I'm at.
Okay. Is there a question that's related?
I don't necessarily have a question. I just want to go on record stating that. I just have a hard time with us taking these bans against theirs, because if the truth of the matter is that, and I'm a chubby guy, and I'll admit it, I'm a chubby guy. It is bad for us to eat McDonald's day in and day out. 3 Big Macs every meal and a large fry and a large Coke that you can't get in New York. Are we banning McDonald's? No. Because it comes down to the personal choice. Do I want to eat 3 Big Macs, 3 large fries, and a Coke? Personally, no, but if I wanted to, I could. But we're not going to take that stance. Why are we taking this stance here on something that we just don't know?
So let me reiterate that the bill that is being proposed is to prohibit the sale to minors. I might also add and commend several of the vape shop owners who have voluntarily instituted programs on their own. They're to be commended for that. And I hope that we would have their support in moving that legislation forward.
I'd let you know that Senator Johnson was correct. It was actually in my bill, on my committee last year, that we lost that youth access bill because there are particular players within this room that didn't support it. I'm glad to hear that you're finally on board with us on that and that we move forward with this next year with it.
Dr. Klein, before you leave, I probably have to admit it too. Representative Derby is a chubby guy. So with that, thank you, Dr. Klein, for your testimony and your presentation. I understand that Mr. Jeff Steyer, who is from the Senior Fellow at the National Center for Public Policy Research in Washington, D.C., is snowed in and is not here, but his written testimony will be forwarded to the committee members and I'm sure will be made available on the website. At this time, I would like to recognize Dr. Theodore Wagner, who is Assistant Professor at the Department of Pediatrics for OU Health Sciences Center, for any comments that he may have. Thank you, Dr. Wagner.
Thank you all again for having me here. Anyone who knows an academic knows we can kind of talk ad nauseum about our research and everybody's research. So today I have prepared a statement. Also, I was kind of notified of this on Monday, and I'm glad to be here, but I wrote this last night between about midnight and 4 a.m., so please bear with me. I have plenty of review articles that are published, and my research is all published, so please feel free to go there as well. So again, I'd like to thank you all for inviting me here today to discuss my research as well as my knowledge as it pertains to tobacco harm reduction with a specific focus on e-cigarettes. To tell you a bit about myself, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, an assistant professor at the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center, an Oklahoma TSET research scholar, and one of the co-directors of the Oklahoma Tobacco Research Center, which is also funded by TSET. I also currently receive grant funding from the National Institutes of Health and the Oklahoma Center for the Advancement of Science and Technology. My research focuses on developing and evaluating effective tobacco harm reduction strategies to reduce or eliminate secondhand smoke to children and induce tobacco cessation in parents and other caregivers. I also conduct research evaluating the costs and benefits of emerging tobacco products, such as electronic cigarettes and dissolvable tobacco products. I was invited here today to give a general overview of the main findings from e-cigarettes over the last several years. So I attempt to do that, but I do want you all to understand that e-cigarette research, for all of you who look at it, there's new studies each week, okay? It's not something that it's like, I don't know, we get 2 every 6 months. So I'm always behind no matter what, but I'm up to date to about December 25th on the research. So I'm going to do my best to provide a clear and brief picture of what is tentatively known and what is unknown regarding e-cigarettes. I say tentatively for an important reason. Even the most recent research, and I think people in the vaping community can see this and testify to this, I also think folks at TSET and the health department, folks at OTRC can agree with this. Our current research is about 1 year behind the technology at all points. So what I'm going to talk about today, and the current research, is really about cig-alike e-cigarettes for the most part. Things like Enjoy, Blue Cig, and Views. Very few of the studies are about tank systems. Survey studies often are, and so I'm going to discuss those as well. But also much of the research is about cig-alike e-cigarettes, especially the clinical and laboratory trials. As you know, and from the earlier discussion today, when we discuss e-cigarettes, we're not talking about one type of product. There's cig-alike e-cigarettes, there's tank system e-cigarettes, there's cartomizer e-cigarettes with different batteries, there's mods. Tank systems are those that often you see like in vape shops, cartomizer systems as well. Cig-alike are your Blues, Enjoy, Smoke Tip, Green Smoke, the list goes on and on. I think at one point last year they estimated that there was 130 cig-alike e-cigarette brands. I've seen research from some of my colleagues that is currently under review that shows that different kinds of e-cigarettes actually are better at delivering nicotine to the body than others. Also, that different methods of using these devices can lead to different levels of exposure to toxic chemicals. So with that said, most of the research, again, that I'm about to examine, especially the clinical and laboratory research, examines cig-alike e-cigarettes, and I will, at the end, talk about what is unknown as well. So first, what is tentatively known? More and more individuals are becoming aware of e-cigarettes, as we saw today, with increased awareness leading to increased use. Currently, estimates suggest that approximately 3, upwards of potentially 5% of individuals currently use e-cigarettes. In survey studies, most e-cigarette users report using them because they consider them to be less harmful than regular cigarettes and help them to reduce or quit smoking. And that's about 80 to 85% in the survey studies. E-cigarette users generally report few side effects, report improved coughing and improved breathing. However, the findings of clinical laboratory trials investigating the biological effects of e-cigarettes are a little bit more mixed. For example, as it pertains to lung function, I myself have a study where we did lung function tests and saw a significant reduction after people used cigarettes, smoked their own brand of cigarette, and saw an acute reduction in lung functioning. It was all over the board with e-cigarettes, but not a significant reduction. So what we were, to be honest, what we were looking for was, and you all probably don't remember this, but about a year ago, the concern was, is vegetable glycerin or propylene glycol, do either of those affect us differently? And blue cig is primarily vegetable glycerin, not propylene glycol. And so we know propylene glycol is a lung irritant, and the list goes on and on. Some of those studies were mentioned today. So we actually thought, we hypothesized that we would see, with propylene glycol-based e-cigarettes, more of a reduction in lung functioning. Turned out not to be the case. The reason for that, we suspect, but we're doing the study again, is because of smoking topography or vaping topography, actually how deep they inhaled and how much they inhaled during the time that they were sampling it for those 5 minutes. Okay? But again, we saw a significant reduction in when people smoked a cigarette, but not while vaping. However, since that time, there's also been 2 other studies. One showed the exact same findings that we found. Another found that actually with a more sensitive measure of lung functioning, that you actually did see reductions or increase in airway resistance. Other concerns as it pertains to biological effects are that potentially vegetable glycerin could cause lipoid pneumonia. And so there's one case study reported in Chest, and to my knowledge, Tom Eisenberg, who sits on the FDA TIPSAC panel, came out here recently and spoke to all of us at OTRC in the Cancer Center, and also said that they've noted several other cases that people have reported on e-cigarette vapor forums. So again, not seeing a huge upswell of those, but they are out there. One thing we don't know is long-term use of inhalation of vegetable glycerin. Will that lead to any other issues? Moreover, it is still unclear where e-cigarette vapor is deposited when it is inhaled. I know that seems crazy. We probably all think here that goes right to the lungs, right? We honestly don't know. We don't know if it goes to the mouth, the throat, and lungs, or there's ores in there. Is it mouth or throat or lungs? That study hasn't been done yet. If it is like the nicotine inhaler does a really poor job of delivering anything to the lungs. It's all through the mouth and in the throat. Less than 3% actually makes it to the lungs. Also a big reason why people don't tend to like the nicotine inhaler. It doesn't deliver nicotine very well. Okay. Initial studies examining the chemical constituents of e-cigarettes suggest that compared to regular cigarettes, e-cigarettes have 9 to 450 times lower level of compounds that are potentially toxic and carcinogenic to humans. In some compounds, you see similar levels to the nicotine inhaler. Not exact, and if anybody ever wants to see that table, it's not exact, but it's comparable. Furthermore, there appears to be variability in the nicotine delivered from e-cigarettes, with some producing far less than labeled and occasionally some more, but generally, as time has gone on, studies have shown that they do deliver as labeled. Again, I'd like to note that this and other studies of e-cigarette chemical constituents are based on Cig-alike e-cigarettes, not tank systems. Furthermore, current studies are under review and in press, and I review many of these articles, so I can't share until they come out. But I can tell you one, because he presented this at AACR with me, Maciej Ganowitz, who did a lot of the e-cigarette studies that were discussed today. And he's also a PharmD, is finding that it's actually not the nicotine that is providing a lot of the toxic and carcinogenic compounds. It's actually the flavorants. So specifically, they're finding that with certain citrus flavors and cinnamon flavors, it increases the cytotoxicity of the juice. It also, I know vapor store owners see this, I know vapors see it, but there's tank busting e-liquids, such as citrus flavors and cinnamon flavors, that do erode and degrade the tanks. And actually, again, studies that are currently under review are finding plastic chemicals leaching into the fluid if the tank isn't switched out in enough time. Also, there's some studies that have found heavy metal and silicate particles in the e-cigarette mist. And again, those are with first-generation e-cigarette products like Cig-alike e-cigarettes. Also, new studies on exposure to secondhand vapor are emerging. There was one just December 13th or 19th, also put out by Maciej Ganowitz, and finding that secondhand vapor is likely much safer than secondhand smoke, but still not completely harmless. It was different than the baseline room levels. And specifically what they looked at were nicotine, and that was significantly more than the baseline room levels, very much lower than regular cigarettes. They also saw fine particulate matter was higher than baseline levels, but they did not see any volatile organic compounds that were higher than baseline levels. They left that study saying we still need to look now at other things, things like formaldehyde. So your carbonyls, formaldehyde is one of those, and that's a big one. And then also to look at tobacco-specific nitrosamines that might be emitted in the air. There's also a concern about the potential for third-hand vapor, and vapor which is the vapor that deposits on surfaces. I don't know if you all are familiar with third-hand smoke, but if you've ever walked in an elevator before and no one's in there smoking, but you can smell cigarette smoke, that's smoke that's off-gassing into the room. It has many of the exact same harmful constituents in it as secondhand smoke. If you've ever cleaned out someone's house, helped them move, who was a smoker, you pull that picture off the wall and it's white and then it's orange all around it, that's third-hand smoke. So we are currently doing a study right now investigating third-hand vapor and second-hand vapor at OU Health Sciences Center. Those results, the study will be finished at the end of the fiscal year. It has to be done because we have to spend the money to get it done, but probably be reported here at the end of summer. What about behavior? E-cigarettes appear to significantly reduce cigarette cravings and withdrawal symptoms, and even nicotine-free e-cigarettes have been shown to effectively reduce craving and number of cigarettes smoked, suggesting that e-cigarettes provide a behavioral replacement for smoking by mimicking many of the aspects of smoking. Many things that current nicotine replacement products can't do, even the nicotine inhaler. My research has shown that even among those uninterested in quitting smoking, e-cigarette experimentation alone can increase smokers' motivation and confidence to quit. And when supplied an e-cigarette of their choice, again, Cig-alike e-cigarettes, within a week we called them back and we saw over a 40% reduction in the amount of cigarettes that they were smoking. So how does all of this, impact smoking behavior? Having good, stops withdrawal symptoms, curbs craving. Well, to date, there's a handful of preliminary and sometimes uncontrolled studies that indicate that e-cigarette use leads to many smokers reducing their total number of regular cigarettes, but only about 6 to 8% of smokers achieving total abstinence from nicotine. A very recent RC randomized clinical trial comparing the e-cigarette to the nicotine patch found that e-cigarettes tend to be comparable to the patch in helping smokers quit nicotine, with 7.3% of e-cigarette users and 5.8% of patch users abstinent at 6 months. Lastly, I would like to discuss the Gateway study, my Gateway study. It's my labs. It's actually one of my students. She's the first author on it, the Gateway study that you guys have heard a lot about. So I wanted to share that with you and maybe give you a little bit more information about it than you haven't heard. So it was a large survey, scale survey study of youth, and it indicated that most youth, well, other studies indicated that most youth who try cigarettes are also smokers, with approximately only about 3 to 5% of non-smoking youth trying cigarettes. Also, at least one suggests that, unlike the research with adult smokers, youth were not necessarily motivated to use e-cigarettes, but by a desire to quit cigarette smoking. So suggesting maybe they're interested just in experimenting or anything else. What was missing from many of these studies was an understanding of what was the first nicotine product that they ever tried and what nicotine product was the youth currently using. So were these just cigarette smokers, kids who are already smoking cigarettes who decided to go to an e-cigarette, or are there actual kids who started off an e-cigarette and then move on to something else more harmful? So to help us begin to address this gateway potential, if you will, of e-cigarettes, my lab conducted a large survey in Oklahoma University. 1,304 students completed the survey. The results indicated that e-cigarettes was the first nicotine product tried by 7%, or 46. It gets reported as 43, and I have no idea why, because I sent them the entire paper, but 46 of those who had ever tried a tobacco product. So 7% of youth, it was their first product tried. However, only 1 or 2% of those students who was a current daily user of any tobacco product, compared to 10% who first tried combustible cigarettes and 21% who first tried traditional smokeless tobacco, so did. Interestingly, only 1 student was still using e-cigarettes, and this was reported only as occasional use. The results of the study were both disappointing but also relieving. Disappointing that e-cigarettes served as the first nicotine product tried by youth, but also relieving in that, at least for this sample at this time, with these current e-cigarette products, trying e-cigarettes did not lead to a substantial number of youth using cigarettes and traditional smokeless tobacco products. However, interestingly, and I know we're not talking, I'm going to try and get us off topic, but this study also indicated that hookah, or water pipe smoking, is something that needs to be addressed, and it too is proliferating in the youth population. It was not only tried by more students than any other tobacco product, 38%. It was also the first tobacco product tried by 24% of the students who ever tried tobacco. We conclude this study with the following statement. And again, it's under review at American Journal of Preventive Medicine, so that will be out sometime in the summer. Academics take a long time to get things published. We conclude with the following statement. Continued surveillance of emerging tobacco products, especially the use of e-cigarettes and hookah, is vital, as the products will continue to proliferate and improve effective delivery of nicotine. As such, their potential as a gateway product may change and needs to be closely watched. So that's what we know. Now I'm going to speak a little bit off the cuff and tell you what we don't know and questions that I have. I've gone to a lot of vape shops, and I'm very thankful of the vapor store owners for being very transparent with me and letting me come in and survey their customers. I mean, I've sat inside vape shops for, Sean's vape stores. I haven't. I don't do that much work. My students definitely do. My students, I've been there a couple times. At Vapor Hut and OKC Vapes and Edmund Vapes, we've been to almost all the stores. And they've allowed us to come in there, so we're very thankful for that. What interests me is how tank systems are going to change the game. Because I think it's pretty clear from research that we're going to present at SR&T conference here in February, is that at least the people coming to vape stores are not using cig-alike e-cigarettes. But a lot of them have tried cig-alike e-cigarettes and have eventually moved on to something else because they don't deliver nicotine very well, okay? I think that's also why you saw quit rates in the Bolin study. That's the Lancet article that I cited here, comparing it to the patch, why you saw quit rates that were relatively low. Because unfortunately, they deliver nicotine quite poorly. And Tom Eisenberg and a lot of other folks have done that research and are continuing to do that research. However, this also isn't published, but Tom Eisenberg, it's under review right now, has shown that cartomizer systems and tank systems do deliver nicotine quite well. Okay? So I'm interested in seeing the evolution of the product and how it's going to change. And as it becomes a better delivery device of nicotine, what that does to population use. Currently, many of the people that are using e-cigarettes are those who were completely uninterested in quitting with the other products, had tried and failed to quit those products. But now we're starting to see more people who are going to be trying these products, and we are seeing people who aren't starting out with the cig-alikes. They're going right to the tank systems. So I'm interested in seeing how that functions as it pertains to getting people to completely switch from cigarettes. I also question and am concerned about, will dual use be common? I will tell you from the vapor store folks that are here and the vapor shop owners, I'm about to publish the data that I've gone there and and had my lab go in and do surveys, and we did biochemical verification of everyone to make sure that they were telling us the truth. But about 66% of the people coming into Oklahoma vape stores were actually biochemically verified quit. So they were not smoking. So 66% were not dual using. And CO lasts about 3 days. Okay? And about 70% reported that they were quit, but 66% were actually verified that they were quit. So I want to know how that's going to change. Will dual use change? Because right now we see a lot of dual use as it pertains to things like blue cig, and as that pie chart showed, and potentially with other cig-alike products. I want to know what the long-term effects are. I also think that at some point product standards are coming down where there's going to be FDA regulation and people limit not necessarily the ingredients, but what gets exposed, tobacco-specific nitrosamines available in the products. I think that's a biggie. Monoformaldehyde. We now know that dripping on a tank system, it's a way of using e-cigarette, and I know I've had this conversation before with Sean. Now we do actually have the data that shows that by the third, if you drip, by the third hit you take off that, you actually have more formaldehyde than you do coming from a regular cigarette. But you definitely don't on the first hit. So it deals with the heating of the coil, and it gets hotter once there's less fluid around it that's saturating it. Lastly, I want to talk briefly about flavorings. From a legislative standpoint, and I'm going a little off here, but flavorings are oftentimes what we're finding in the research is bringing people from cigarettes to e-cigarettes. They also tend to be the things now that we're finding out could cause some harm. So it could also be the things that might bring kids to this if that were going to happen. So going forward, flavorings is also going to be a part of that issue. People are going to have to choose wisely when it comes, but I know there's going to be more research that obviously comes with flavorings in figuring out how much of the harm comes from certain flavorings as opposed to others. So I think that would help inform that decision. So with that said, I will stop.
Do any members of the Senate have any questions? Senator Standridge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You said 66% were smoke-free. Do you know if any of those 66% that the vape was their first product, that they never really smoked cigarettes, or do you have?
We did not ask that question, but on that survey, we actually this is right in the store. We have a survey with 20 questions, and it asks about, are you currently using an e-cigarette, and are you smoke-free? To my knowledge, everyone was a smoker, though, because we did have a question there, how many cigarettes did you smoke per day before using an e-cigarette? And I can't recall anyone not smoking any cigarettes whatsoever.
Doctor, I've got a couple of questions. I assume that there aren't any longitudinal studies of any population of e-cigarette users that we can look at to see what are the harmful effects, like we've been able to do with cigarettes, smokeless tobacco, and things like that. Am I correct?
Reducing smoking, I think there's a year-long study that shows reduction in smoking. Now, if you want to look at lung functioning or something like that, no, there's nothing long-term.
One of the question, I'm asking that because both Dr. Klein and Dr. Lichtenfeld brought up that there is not enough research and that we need to wait and see more research.
Yep.
And my question is, well, waiting involves time. That's a longitudinal study. Is there any study out there that you think we can rely upon that looks at a population and then determines what the adverse effects are of e-cigarettes? And if there's not, how much time should we allow before we start seeing studies like that?
I think the studies are going on now. I think, in the research world, it's very different, I think, than the policy world and everything. This is a different world for me. From a researcher standpoint, what we're talking about now are endgame strategies to end the tobacco epidemic. And a big part of that, and a lot of the money from NIH going out, is actually looking into reducing nicotine in combustible cigarettes down to non-addictive levels. And over time, bringing that down to non-addictive levels, which technically the FDA has the authority to do from the Tobacco Control Act. They can't take it down to zero, but they can take it down to very low levels, presumably non-addictive. The idea then would be that you reduce nicotine in regular combustible, the most harmful tobacco products, and leave them potentially at addictive levels in less harmful products like e-cigarettes and dissolvable tobacco, things like that, to effectively switch people.
And that kind of leads into my second line of questions, is that honestly, some of the things that you were talking about, I didn't know what those words meant. There were too many syllables in them for me. But those that I got, it was that in vapors, it's not the nicotines, it's the flavoring which are providing the toxicity, which, okay, that's an interesting statement. That secondhand vapor is safer than secondhand smoke, but it's not harmless. There is some harm, but it's less harm. That there are positive changes in smoking habits, but that only 6 to 8% achieved abstinence with that.
To complete nicotine-free.
Nicotine-free. I listen to those and I think, well, that certainly follows along with those who advocate e-cigarettes. It is not harmless, but it is less harmful. But yet I come back to the point that all the research that I'm hearing from you seems to verify what's being said. But then I listen to Dr. Klein and I listen to Dr. Lichtenfeld, and we've got to hold on until we get more research. I feel like I'm getting a conflicting message from people who are researchers and learned men. Am I correct?
That was sweet of you. Yeah, sweet guy, I guess. No, I agree. I think it's because we have very different roles. If you look at my limitations of the study, in all of my studies, and you'll never pin a researcher down to say, oh, another study couldn't be done. We always have ideas. And you will see that, like in my Gateway paper, that's why I read that last piece, because e-cigarette products are changing all the time. And thankfully, the heaviest lifting I have to do is to say, well, there needs to be a study to keep following this. We need to keep surveilling it. I make zero decisions for you all as to what to do. So I can be incredibly clear with you, and I'll even tell you a bit of a story. So you might all be surprised that, given that, I don't know, people seem to dislike TSET and things like that I am funded by TSET. TSET funds me about 50%-ish of my salary. The rest is from NIH and from I see patients. I run a sleep clinic, but they fund me. And I remember during my interview talking with Tracy Strader. I remember in my interview talking with the other directors of OTRC, telling them what my research was. And my research was giving parents dissolvable tobacco or e-cigarette or the nicotine lozenge as a means to reduce a child's secondhand smoke exposure, because there's an area right there where we've had 40 clinical. I know.
Doctor, you are somewhat far afield.
Yeah.
My question to you is, you seem to be referring to research which says that e-cigarettes are less harmful. Okay. I listen to Dr. Lichtenfeld and I listen to Dr. Klein say we need to do more research. I then come back to what you just said a moment ago. A researcher is always going to say there is a need for more research.
Correct.
I'm hearing a contradiction in terms. You are reporting some studies.
I guess what you're asking is, when does the bolus of work reach critical mass that we then go, here's the policy?
Assuming I knew what the word bolus meant, I would agree with you on that. You say what? Okay.
And I'm not trying to, I am probably the most direct person, or one of the most direct people you ever meet. I don't know, honestly, when it comes to public health, what pulls the trigger for people. Okay. I will tell you, for me, and as a researcher, someone asked, what would I tell someone who was smoking or had a choice between smoking a cigarette or using an e-cigarette, and that was it. I don't know, for some reason, gun to their head. I would say an e-cigarette. I wouldn't say a regular cigarette. I think the research community is coming more to a point where we are saying, yes, and this has only been recent. This has been changing over the last 3 years, especially, anyway, I won't go too much into that, but I think now people are more trying to get into a harm reduction continuum. What's important, though, to understand is that harm reduction continuum, what we do know is exposure to those chemicals, so those toxins, carcinogens, and things like that, not absorption. So does that make sense? So
it does, but it raises the question with me. We as policymakers are being asked to make a policy or not make a policy. Yeah. And what I am hearing from you is, would more research make for a better policy? Yes.
Yes.
But if based on what is out there today, the legislature had to make a decision, you would say, with that gun to your head, e-cigarettes are a less harmful alternative than a cigarette.
Correct. I'm not sure what legislation it would support or not.
And by the way, I would ask that everyone be respectful in their silence. I know that I love it, applause myself, but if we can just get past all this for now. The other thing that I had a question about, we're talking about your survey of 1,304 OU students, and that of that 1,300,
not OU students in Oklahoma. I can't say the university technically.
Okay, 1,304 students in the state of Oklahoma.
Right, there you go.
46 of those had used e-cigarettes as their first product that they had tried.
Correct.
Now, out of that 46, only one was a current daily user, but I wasn't sure, were you saying of e-cigarettes or of tobacco or what?
Sorry about that. Yeah, one was a daily user of combustible cigarettes.
Okay.
And one was a non-daily user of e-cigarettes.
Okay. But that the people who were using the e-cigarettes as their first item didn't continue in using e-cigarettes, and you seem to recall that as a disappointment. Did I get that correct?
It was a disappointment. I'm very happy. The thing I was appreciative of was the fact that they didn't go on to then use more harmful products, combustible products. And even traditional smokeless tobacco does have some harmful effects, especially ones with higher levels of tobacco-specific nitrosamines. But what I was disappointed about was that even that was their first product tried. But if someone wanted to pin me to the wall and say, well, might they not have tried a regular cigarette first? Yes, they might have tried a regular cigarette first.
So let me make sure I understand.
Yes.
You survey 1,304 people.
Correct.
46 of them used e-cigarettes as their first look into the use of tobacco.
Correct.
One of those 46 was at that time a current combustible cigarette user. One was an intermittent user.
Of non-daily cigarettes.
Non-daily
Or
cigarettes.
E-cigarettes, pardon me.
Okay.
E-cigarettes.
Oh, of e-cigarettes.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
I only have one cigarette user.
But that of the 46 that were using e-cigarettes, they didn't continue with e-cigarettes.
Yeah, only one was a non-daily user of e-cigarettes.
So what I'm gleaning from that is that if I were one of these 1,304 and I had gone off and said, well, I'm going to light up with a Marlboro or something, I would think that my chances of continuing and becoming addicted to that Marlboro are much greater than my becoming addicted or connected in some way with those e-cigarettes. Is that a legitimate conclusion to reach from what you're telling me?
I didn't understand the question.
Okay. I think we've got a lot of research that says that a Marlboro cigarette is an addictive cigarette.
Sure is.
Okay?
Yeah.
What I'm hearing you say is that only 46 people used this, but none of them were continuing with it, that it doesn't seem to have any type of addictive
potential
from what you were seeing.
So I'm going to answer this generally in the sense that, yeah, I think mainly what we were seeing there are likely first-generation e-cigarette type products. And what that means is products like Blue Cig, Enjoy, Pro Smoke, Smoke Tip, the cig-alike products. They don't deliver nicotine very well. There's a study in 2010 that showed that it delivered a little bit faster than a nicotine inhaler, but not much and to very low levels. And then a cigarette was up here delivering nicotine, and e-cigarette was down here along with the nicotine inhaler. However, studies are now showing that tank system e-cigarettes and cartomizers, and ask the gallery too at some point how long they use those products before they switch to a tank. Tank systems do deliver nicotine.
You're going to have to define a tank system for me.
Sean, I know you wanted to show.
No. If we're talking about second generation, third generation, then that's. Are you telling me that the tank system is a better delivery system for nicotine?
Yeah, it's a better nicotine delivery device.
Okay. Any further questions? Doctor, thank you. I found you very interesting, and I learned a lot from you. I'm grateful. Members, thank you. I want to thank the members of the House for the joint study. If Representative Shelton is still angry with me, I apologize. I'll just have to learn to live with that. Thank you all, and have a good afternoon.
So guys, I take it that's the end of this. So thanks for hanging with us, and make sure you definitely check out vapingmilitia.com. And I'm going to go ahead and kill this broadcast. Peace, love, and vape polite, and become a part of something. Get out there. See ya. I will have to later, Martin, but I will. Guys, peace out. We'll see ya.